Where's she going?
You guys ready? All right, everyone. Welcome to the August 24th, 2023 BAR small meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. I'll be your chair this evening. My fellow board members with me tonight are Bill Turner, Fillmore Wilson, and Bill Huey. City staff present are Frankie Pinto, BARS Administrator, and Linda Bennett, Senior Preservation Planner. The order of today's meeting will be as follows. We'll start with each application with an introduction of it given by city staff for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by the applicant presentation. Applicants will have a 10-minute period of time to present their application, and if you are an owner, designer, consultant, speak during this period versus during public comment, and please approach the podium so that we can all hear you. Followed by the applicant's presentation, we typically have board questions. By ordinance, the board can ask questions of the applicant at any time. By custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by public comments. I'll read into the record any written public comments received. And then if you are speaking as a member of the public, again, please approach the podium and state your first and last name for the record. And if you are a nearby resident, please state your address as well. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. Once we've heard from the public and city staff, the applicant will have a 5-minute period of time to clarify or respond to anything raised in the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations. Once we've heard from the applicant and the public, public discussion will be closed and we'll move into board discussion and a vote. Please know that the purview of our board is architecture only, so comments related to zoning, livability, lot line concerns are not within the purview of this board and should not be voiced here. Results of the meeting will be posted online on the city's website. We have no deferrals this evening, so I will move right to our agenda. Agenda item A1 is review and approval of the minutes from the August 10th, 2023 meeting. I make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. The motion passes unanimously. Agenda item B1 is 426 Sumter Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
Yes, ma'am. Sumter Street is not surveyed in West Side circa 1935 in the historic materials demolition purview. They're requesting demolition of all siding, windows, doors, exterior trim, fenestration changes, and alterations to Piazza Street. This is the property's location at the corner of Sumter and Miranda Homes. Existing site photos. Some context of Sumter Street. A sampler map from 1944 showing the property. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
My name is Mike Eibert. I'm a contractor for 426 Sumter Street. The changes we want to make to the windows, the fenestration changes are driven by wanting to get a modicum of privacy for this homeowner, so they have a newborn all the way. And so on the Miranda home side, with the current double hung windows, they're just a pane of glass away from the sidewalk. That's right there. So anytime someone walks by, it's really loud. They were hoping to close some of that off, awning windows above to still get natural light, but have a little more privacy. On the front, the most conspicuous elevation, obviously, same thing. We wanted to get rid of that big picture window in the middle to offer a little more privacy, but we did go to pains to try and make the front elevation as congruent to we had President Street, the exact address. But based on that and quite a few others, 2 double hung windows, adding a transom window above the new piazza door, hand crimped metal roof above that. So we feel strongly that the changes in the front elevation will make the house more historic and add more character to it. And then regarding the siding, it's in pretty bad shape in most locations, has been repaired in quite a few locations, and all that I've seen is that it's 1x8 treated stuff. So I saw the profile, nothing indicating anything historic. So for us to replace in kind would add thousands to material cost, would add thousands to maintenance over the years. For what we saw would be no historic preservation whatsoever, it's just flat stock. So that's why we were looking to go with a textured hardy, which does have some character. Obviously, they have the thickness of a 1x8, but we saw that would be at least as a lateral historically. So that's really it. And that's why we're doing it. And obviously, in the process, we'd like to insulate the home, so we don't want to strip everything off the inside. We're going to insulate the walls, sheet it, wrap it, make it a little more energy efficient for them. But we obviously are aware of the mission of this board, and we're mindful of that in putting these plans together. And for your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Eifert. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant? We had no written public comment submitted. Do we have anyone speaking to the public?
April Wood, Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for demolition of siding, windows, doors, and trim, as well as the other alterations to 426 Sumner Street. And we have the following comments. One, it appears that some of the historic siding remains more on the upper portions of the building, and the siding should be retained on the house. Regarding the front windows, if the BAR is going to approve removal of the large window opening on the front elevation, we recommend that a stipulation that the replacement windows on the front are traditional 6/6 wood windows. The proposed changes to the piazza screen doors around do not fit the character of this house. The example in the application shows a more ornate Freedman's cottage with a wider piazza screen. Similar modifications of 426 Sumner Street would not be in keeping with the character or scale of this house. Removal of the door into the house from the piazza screen seems ill-advised and leaves the piazza without function. We recommend retaining a door into the house from the piazza. We respectfully recommend denial of these aspects of this application.
Lauren Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC appreciated the opportunity to visit the site this morning. While this building has undergone alterations resulting in the replacement of some original windows and siding, total removal of these elements is not appropriate, and we encourage the applicant to work with staff to develop a plan for selective demolition, retaining any salvageable historic material. The BAR policy statement for historic materials demolition purview outlines helpful guidance for projects like this and offers flexibility to make rehabilitation feasible and encourage the applicant to align the scope of work with what is allowed under this policy.
Do we have anyone else speaking from the public? Frank, if you give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observations, the west elevation contains infill and additions. The windows and doors on these portions are not original to the structure. The window configuration on the south front The front elevation is atypical for a freedman's cottage. We were wondering if that has been previously altered. On the east elevation, the windows may not be original, but locations appear to be. If cementitious siding is of a similar size, exposure, and profile per the North of Line policy statement, it is an in-kind replacement. So staff conditions for approval, entry door and window within porch are likely original locations and should remain. North elevation window, if an original location, should remain. And it would be unfortunate to remove the wood siding. However, provide information on replacement material, size, exposure, and profile for a staff review or an in-kind replacement. Staff recommendation is approval, budgetary for this wording, approval of removal of center window and piazza screen awning at south elevation, approval of fenestration changes on west side additions, denial of removal of porch door and window, and denial of removal of east elevation window.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Eibert, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments? All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I could start out here. I think with this one, you almost have to look at the original portion of the house and the additions. As far as the siding goes, I agree that a lot of the siding, upper part of the house is probably is original, and it should be retained. Just patched back in a similar profile. As far as the siding on the additions, I don't think we need to look at that quite like we look at the main body of the house. I think there's some leeway on that. Some siding replacement could, to me, it could be redone, the additions. I'm not so much concerned about that. As far as the east side, the windows on the east side, I can understand the need for privacy on that side. I've lived in similar situations. It's not fun having windows right on the street. And I'm not so sure that those windows are original. They may be, they may not be. So I'm a little on the fence with that. I understand the need for privacy, but they may not be original. Picture window replacement, I think, is a good move. It's definitely not original to the house. As far as window replacements go, I think once again, I think you look at the historic core of the building and the addition. I think the historic portion of the building, all of those windows that are replaced, and I don't think any of the windows are original, should go back as 6/6, and then maybe you have some leeway in the addition on doing something else. I agree with staff on the piazza screen changes. I think that's pretty much it.
I think I agree with staff and what Bill has said. I think it's unfortunate on the Brandon Holmes Street side, east side, sort of lose those windows, but it is right on the sidewalk, and the windows that are there, the openings may be original, but the windows certainly are not. So I feel like there's a little leeway there. I agree with staff on the window and door on the piazza, and I don't think I have anything else to add.
I'm in agreement with staff other than the denial of removal of those east elevation windows. I think I'll be okay removing those.
Street.
I agree with Bill's assessment of potentially a little bit more leeway with the addition than the historic core. But yeah, I'm in agreement with the statements that have been made.
Who wants to
And
make
I
a
agree
motion?
about the windows that are remaining and being replaced if they're similar size, 6/6.
Okay.
Now, we're going to, proposal was calling for, I believe it was Anderson 400 windows, which are, I saw 400 windows on the list.
I looked at it, I didn't.
Which is not an all wood window, just letting you know that.
But I think there's some leeway on replacement
The
windows out
policy
there.
statement allows for clad windows.
They are.
The policy statement allows for clad windows.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
And that isn't, if it's 400s, that's an STL at least.
Yeah, they're double pane.
Oh, yeah, but they're,
But it'll be a lot quieter.
they're really, and at least they are STLs and not,
Right. Yeah.
is there,
The transom over the. Yes, on the screen.
That's good.
I thought we had a comment about that. I'm wondering if that got edited out when Tori made comments.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it,
but the demolition of the,
but, well, I don't know if that's
The hood.
within our code. It'd be the demolition of the hood, so it's not
it's
the
demolition of the
transom,
hood
it's
is what
demo.
we're considering, not,
That's actually the
not what-
addition of the transom and the hood.
It's not the addition. We don't have purview over that. It's the demolition
Be
of
the
the
demolition of
existing.
the hood and the.
So to demolish the existing hood.
Yeah.
To make way for it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely
It's just gonna look at
appreciate
I don't
that.
Let me go pictures.
Yeah, that'd be great. Too straightforward. I think that was why, I believe April's statement about maybe it's, what's proposed is a little different. So that is pretty much in keeping their assessment of this.
Yeah, I have no issue with the transom, but we don't have purview over that, so it's just the demolition.
Yeah.
This is one of the
yeah,
frustrating.
you what goes back.
Right, so I like what they've proposed, but we
I mean, I don't,
can't consider it.
It's just the demolition of the existing.
That, and I think it would be demo of some of the
above it,
parapet, right?
because it's, so it's demolition of the transom and the siding on the parapet. I think that's correct.
Any of that with barge board or anything with, any of that barge board or anything with original?
I think the siding on the little parapet is probably above the door is probably original. A lot of the siding on the front is original. When you get around to the east side, a lot less of it is original.
Only at the top on the east side. It was original, but my pictures here. I was trying to compare this to roofs and some of the sort of oddities we have to do. Would we approve cutting a hole in the roof? But this isn't really comparable.
On the rear elevation, I think I'm good with that side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would encourage the retention of that corner board on the back, so that it kind of announces that that was the end of the existing house. And in doing so, you might would need to slide that center window in there, so it's not, because I believe it interferes with that. Ooh. Table all this, yeah. Okay, I'll give a motion to shut.
We We can start with staff's recommendation, but then move it around from there as well.
Approval, final details of staff. With staff's recommendations, with the exception of the windows on the east elevation. And then retention of all usable historic siding. Retention of rear corner board. Everything else is covered in staff. The doors, and on the main, the historic core of the building, use all 6 over 6 windows. And the siding, but only
For the front windows, Bill?
Thank you.
for any of the windows on the historic core of the building, would be 6 over 6. All the addition.
It started a sentence about the siding.
Yeah, the siding on the original core of the building should remain. And however, the siding on the additions could be replaced.
Does that go with the retention of all usable historic siding?
On the main core.
On the-
Historic core. Sorry for the comment.
No, I'm gonna read it back, what I think. Okay, so it's approval of removal of center window and piazza awning at south elevation. Approval of fenestration changes on west side additions. Approval of removal of the east elevation windows. Denial of removal of the porch door and windows. With board comments that, the applicant should retain all usable historic siding on the historic core of the building. Also retain the rear corner board, 6x6 window replacements on historic core of the building. I think that's it. And final review by staff.
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second to Bill Turner's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Omar. The motion to a vote, Bill Huey, Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Moore.
Stay in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank y'all. Okay, agenda item 2 is 221 Yates Avenue. Frank, can you give us an introduction overview, please?
221 Yates is a National Register property circa 1942 and landmark overlay. They are requesting complete demolition of existing single-family house and detached garage. This is the property's location on Yates Avenue. And since you can't see anything from the street, we don't have any street views. Also, the applicant's presentation pretty much had everything we would have included. So I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Matt Compton with the City of Charleston, Department of Parks, I'm the project manager for this project, and it's been a while since.
Matt, there's a clicker up there. Also, I can flip through it if that's easier.
Very good, well, that's just a minute. All right, so this site plan shows the property, which is, it's 3 parcels that include all of that grayed out area. That's a conservation easement that's held by the South Carolina Battleground Preservation Trust. The house is kind of in the middle of the image. It was originally constructed, 2 portions of it were built in 1942. The northern portion of that we think is in its original location. The western portion was added, we believe, in the early 1960s. And sometime after 1976, the southern portion was located from elsewhere nearby to that location. The garage dates to 1990. The 2 original buildings, the north and south piece of the structure, were originally described as camp buildings, which we understood to be kind of rustic. And then when the property was renovated renovated by the owners in the sixties. Improvements were made, and then further improvements were made in the eighties, and then the last owner made interior improvements in 2005. And the house is not the reason that we have this piece of property. And when we acquired the property to make a park, we didn't know exactly what we were going to do with the house. We thought we might be able to repurpose it into a structure that we could use on site. Subsequent to acquiring the property, there was a structure fire, and a lot of the interior of the house was damaged as a result of that. And then during the pandemic, we weren't able to work on the project, and we've had a lot of vandalism on the site. The garage is nothing special, and it's in a bad location for the program. The house is in the prime location on the property, but unfortunately, we don't think we can program it to fit the needs of the park. So we respectfully request approval for the demolition of both of them. We have shared the demolition concept with SHPO because the foundation for the house is actually built into portions of the earthworks. And they have given us conceptual approval to leave portions of that foundation in place so that we can minimize the disturbance of the earthworks and the trees that are growing. But when we're done, we'll be able to reshape the earthworks. Put a small picnic shelter here, one of the cannons used to be. I don't know if there's some other pictures. There's a plaque from when the neighborhood was just getting developed around it, 1933. That's before the property had a house constructed on it. Most of it was still being farmed except for the fort itself. 1976, you can see the one element of just over there. That one got relocated to its current location, and then there used to be another garage on site that was torn down at some point. Don't know when. County records show that the original house was 1942 and the garage was 1990. That's the street view. Paved street on one side, dirt street on the other. The garage is probably 200 yards from there, and the house another 75 yards beyond it. That view's not going to change. So really we'll never be able to see it. That's the view down the entrance. The garage is on your right, back and back. The house is further back. There's the garage. Vandals have done a number on it. That's the house. That's the interior courtyard space of the house. So the wing on the left was relocated sometime after 1976. The portion on the right was constructed sometime after 1942, prior to 1976. We think it was around 1960, based off of the foundation materials that were in there. That's the view from the open space of the fort property, looking back towards the house, and saw the view of the fort towards the house. At the top of those stairs that you saw in the previous photo. And, this is the south elevation, again looking across the earthwork up towards the house. That's the inside of the house. I apologize for this one, the inside was. And that's the view from where the house is situated. So we think that taking the house down and opening that view up would be the best long-term use of that particular part of the park. 1864 drawing of the fort that we then were able to overlay on LiDAR and barely see the outline of the house in blue over on the left. Kind of shows how the house is situated. Right up on top of the fort, the section down in the red box on the bottom that came off of the prior image. Was able to scale it up from these drawings to show the section on the house and matching the 1864 military manual so that we get the profile right. That allowed us to get the scale in there. Feel confident this within a few 2 or 3 feet of where the fort was originally. So we would really like to showcase this space for public use. We think that this would work well. SHPO's no adverse impact on it. And so kind of a section through to show how the house is situated on the fort, in the fort. Different looks through there. Lots of different angles, so it's fun to try to figure all this out. We're still learning about it. Using the pictures that we submitted to the SHPO, show the crawl space that's kind of built into the full area. There was a prior structure fire that was covered in this mechanical cellar area that would be the red portion of this, which is the deepest portion inside the it's dug down into it. So probably need a slab down in there, reshape it. Apologize for the cartoonish drawings there. And that's it.
Thank you. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant? I thought the most interesting fact this morning was there was an 1860 manual on how to build a fort, and this was designed based on that.
I like that.
Okay. Did you have a question? Oh. All right, we had one written public comment submitted from Neil Sneath, Riverland Terrace. On behalf of the Riverland Terrace Neighborhood Association, please expedite the demolition of the non-historic structures at Fort Pemberton. It has become a haven for vagrant and trespassing issues. The surrounding neighbors continue to be negatively affected, and CBD Team 3 resources are depleted every time they have to respond to these nuisance and dangerous issues. Demo of the house, along with the proper signage that it's an active construction site, would deter criminal behavior. Do we have anyone speaking in public? Frankie, give the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observations, the demolition of the house and the garage accommodates a larger preservation effort of the historic fort. And we just had one condition, we would ask that the slate roof tiles be retained and reused either on site or another city project, if that is possible. Our recommendation is approval of demolition of house and attached garage with staff condition.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Compton, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments?
No, ma'am. I think we're fine with that. We can do our best to salvage as many of the houses as possible.
All right, public comments and the applicant's presentations now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
I think you could almost look at this as like three different things. The garage is kind of a no-brainer. The addition is kind of a no-brainer. The other two structures, yes, they're historic, and if this were a different situation, we would probably say they're restorable. But I think you have to look at the greater good here of the project, and that is the earthworks. I don't know that you could really relocate these on the site without doing more damage to the earthworks. So I think it's appropriate to approve this for the greater good of the more historic portion of the property.
I agree. I think it's an insensitive addition.
Agreed.
Did you make a motion?
Yes, I did. Motion is approval for demolition.
All right.
With the condition that slates be salvaged and reused by the outside.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor for approval of demolition with the staff condition, which incorporates. Do I have a second to Bill Turner's motion?
Second.
Bill, put the motion to a vote. Fillmore?
Yea in favor.
Bill Turner?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey?
Yea in favor.
Chair vote to the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 3 is 1 Stratton Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction and overview of the project, please.
Ma'am. 1 Stratton is a category 3 in Charleston Village, circa 1855 in the Oldham Historic District. They are requesting demolition of a rear addition. This is the property's location on Stratton. Some existing site photos. Context of Stratton. And some context from Trumbo Street looking at the addition. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thanks. I'm Ashley Jennings. I'm the architect on the project with you tonight. Or Joe and Allie, Brendan's Allie. So they're looking at the house and are excited about the next phase of work. They've done some renovation work to the existing structures and really good restoration work. And they're looking at an addition to the rear. This is and I mentioned this morning at this idea, thank you to those of you that were able to come. This is a little odd in that we're going to ask for demolition tonight. We're not going to propose another addition to the property because we have to go through zoning. Zoning has asked us to kind of go out of sequence and ask for the demolition request here tonight, complete the zoning process, and so the intent is to remove the addition and to propose another addition in the back. But it is a historic addition. We like to think of everything that's historic as being something that's pretty valuable. So we always tread lightly when we have to ask for demolition of anything that's historic. And we believe that this addition is circa sometime 1902 is when it shows up in the Sanborn maps. It is an odd addition. It's been added on in a place that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. In other words, and you can see this in the Sanborn maps here. It sidles right up to the back of the existing structure where the L is, with what was a really small hyphen, and it's a 1.5 story structure that comes within about 6 feet of the back of the original single house. And that, it blocks the rear window of the gable end of that L. What's happened over time, there hasn't been a whole heck of a lot of modifications to the building, but that hyphen is now gone. As you can see, there was an addition or an extension of the enclosure of the piazza and then an extension to the rear that's kind of bridged the space between the existing structure and the back of the original structure, the original structure and the addition. And that hyphen element is gone. The other thing that's happened over time is the fenestration on the exterior has changed. And we believe that of all the original openings that perhaps this little window right here was original. We think that the door, there was likely a door here. This is obviously not the original door. The stair element is not original. We don't think that these windows, they're old, but I don't know that they were original. And then as you look at the rear elevation, these doors are not original. And we suspect there was probably a window up here at one point. But you can see in this elevation the way that addition blocks the rear gable, or the rear window of the L. So we're asking for a demolition request tonight. That's not the logic isn't that it's in bad shape. It's more because we feel like the addition maybe wasn't a great design to begin with. This diagram just shows you a little bit of the conversation that I've had with the owners about if we were to retain the addition, what we would need to do to be able to make it usable. Right now, the addition sits lower in elevation. The first floor of the addition sits lower than the first floor of the house, by about 1'4", which is enough that the whole house sits way below base flood elevation, obviously, design flood elevation. But one thing they would like to do is bring it up and make it part of, more legible as part of the house, as a usable space that's in the kitchen of the house. In order to do that, there are two thoughts. One would be to disconnect the existing support structure from the foundation and raise it. The other would be to modify the floor elevation within the structure and remove the second floor to make it a taller space. And the reason you would need to do that is because the ceiling height's in there. And so in light of that relationship to the house, we thought that might be another reason to consider the demolition of the structure, because we're going to, if we do propose to retain it, there's going to be some modifications to the original elevation. And that's really not for discussion tonight, but it's just something that we've been thinking about. I wanted to illustrate it tonight for you to look at. I'll go back. I guess the best thing to do is to go back to the elevation, so you have to look at it somebody's reference. But specifically, I think that the really poignant thing is this relationship right here. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Just a quick question, Ashley, it's interesting they designed this with hyphens. Interesting. Were you able to discern where that original little hyphen connection was? What was the room, do you know what the room potentially was in the back of the main house and connection there? I'm just trying to figure out. Why, this is funky, like you said. I'm trying to figure out what
I think,
was going
well,
on.
just to answer your question about the hyphen, I think that the hyphen was probably right here. This has been filled in, this has been filled in, but I think it was pretty skinny. If you look at the Sanborn maps, it's a fairly skinny little thing. I suspect it was designed as a dependency. And the way it's configured right now, there's essentially a kind of a room upstairs that would have been used as a dependency. Downstairs now is being used as the kitchen. You step down into it. But one of the proposals that we're working on with the Britons is to move, this was a piano room previously, a piano here, and the kitchen's here right now. And the proposal is to take this nice space and make it the kitchen. So the intent when we come back with the proposal for the addition or renovation of the structure would be to make this a studio for Joseph.
Anything else? All right. We had no written public comments submitted. Do we have anyone speaking to the public?
Long Fay with the Preservation Society Charleston. The PSC appreciated the chance to visit the site this morning, and they're encouraged to see that much of the historic footprint and structure of the rear addition depicted in the 1902 Sanborn appears to be intact. We are not supportive of the proposal to demolish this portion of the building and encourage the applicant to pursue a solution to retain the existing addition as contemplated in the submittal. Thank you.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for the demolition of the 1902 addition at One Trapman, and we thank the applicants for their time earlier this morning. And this one was a little bit of a tough one for us, but while we understand the desire to make this addition more useful, this is a historic portion of the property with an intact historic footprint. Rather than demolishing this rear addition, we recommend modifying the existing structure within its footprint to accomplish the needs of the property owner. We respectfully recommend denial of this application.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? Frankie, if you'll give the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Some observations. The existing addition is highly visible from Trumbo and minimally visible from Trapman, the partial view of the roof. Existing addition shows lack of character defining features, and the addition appears on the 1902 and 1951 Sanborn maps. Staff conditions for approval, we're requesting more information on age and construction of the addition, and our recommendation is deferral for requested information unless the site visit has told us more really. And I will say that this is something that we really deliberated over as staff because it's a very unusual structure. We're not quite sure what to do with it.
Okay, thank you, Frankie. Ashley, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment and city staff comments and recommendations?
I would be happy to do some more research on the age and construction of specific elements of the building if y'all felt like that would be helpful in reviewing the demolition application.
All right, public comment on the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote. Would be interested to hear from Phil Moore.
I know,
It's
he's
on the
still
19.
up there whispering.
It's on the 1902 sandboard, not quite like it is now, because the sandboard shows that height was tucked in on both sides, and that little space just appears to have somehow been filled in. And, I kind of struggle with this because it is a 1902 part of the house. But honestly, it was probably a really bad idea in 1902. And sometimes I think we have to consider that. And the biggest problem for me is that that would have been, because it obscures the window and the gable end of the more historic house, then I think to really make that usable, you've got to lose that window and attach that thing directly to the house. And I'm not sure that, to me, there's a trade-off there between saving that 1902 little, not very attractive, not very smart addition, and the possibility of restoring the second floor, possibly the second floor of the front house, the main house, to a much more attractive and original condition. So I'm struggling with this a bit.
You're thinking you would potentially sacrifice the integrity of the main house by preserving this whole structure. I wondered if this fell into the category of some things that we've seen, we struggle with preserving bad examples of historic architecture. And seeing it on site, it's funky looking.
I tend to agree with both of you. And I'm usually the one that wants to save everything.
Me too.
But, bad things were built back then, and I think probably for the greater good, even though it's kind of a weird little quirky thing, sometimes quirky is a good thing. I think for the greater good of the more historic portion of the house, we would be better off.
And of course, whatever would go back there, which would come back to us.
Right.
And I would hope that it would be very sensitive, very small.
Well, that right there is what's kind of getting me, because it's kind of like a cart and horse thing. So, in order to go to zoning, you have to get this approval, but given the fact that whatever comes back would be subject to this board's approval, I would just assume, take a look at, although we wouldn't vote on it, take a look at what might be proposed to replace it. Because, for example, if your proposal said to reopen that last bay of the piazza, I'd say that's a pretty good trade-off. Something like that. And, ultimately, it's not like the previous applications where we only have demolition purview. So I guess what I'm saying is potentially the design of a new addition might seem more meritorious to removing this quirky piece. And I appreciate the sequence of events here, but the stipulation of coming here and then going to zoning, and then I guess zoning would be to see what you can get approval to build, but you have to present a plan to zoning. So there will be the construction of a plan, a footprint at least. And I'm trying to understand if potentially a deferral might also include a visual understanding of what might replace this. Is that?
I don't think that's a bad idea. We dealt with this in the past few months with another home where we had a similar purview, and it zoning asked them to go for this board first to get the demolition approved before they would approve the variance. I think in that meeting, and I do want to say for your benefit and for the city's benefit, it is okay in that context to submit what you're going to put in its place so we can take a look at it, because it does really inform what we're going to do. So I'm not opposed. I'm leaning towards approving demolition, but I would also support a motion if you wanted to defer for it to be resubmitted with the proposed plans that are not before us at that meeting, but.
Yeah, I think for points like Fillmore raised, like that window that's blocked off, maybe a current or a new solution might free that up, or like I just suggested, maybe reopening Piazza Bay. I could see potential merit in a rethought that might overweigh the sort of quirky, happen to be 120-year-old piece that's back there. So it's sort of a weighing of options thing. Because strictly said, just looking at it from a demo sense and looking at something that's 1902, of course, our predication would be to say no. But I don't want to say that. If potentially what comes back might be more meritorious to the original house and more sympathetic in context to the whole thing. So I guess that's the way I would think maybe. And staff's suggestion of a deferral for requested information may also include an understanding of what a proposed replacement element might be.
We think that would satisfy zoning.
Well, I
I
think
think
a footprint has to be presented as zoning, right? Am I saying that? Yeah. So it's probably already drawn. I mean, Ashley's smiling.
Yeah.
It's probably already drawn. So, I mean, yeah, I don't want to say no to it until I can see the big picture.
Do you need to see it, or could the applicant describe it to you? If you had a question.
Yeah,
for the
I mean,
applicant.
I guess what are you thinking there? Then we're seeing what is in essence a submittal and saying this is good and you can do this, but we're not voting on that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that if you had a question for Ashley, she could explain verbally what the proposal is that they're going to put in its place, and that gives you an idea. Because right now, we don't have any idea what's going in its place. I'm just
Come back again with a proposal for replacement with a non-vote. As for information purposes only.
so it would be an approval, but
You would be approving a replacement.
well, that's what I was saying. She could verbally describe it, and if we were comfortable, we could approve the demo, knowing okay, this is what we're going to expect to come back before the board.
I think she could show us something that it would be, we would not vote on the proposal.
Oh no, we're only voting on demo today.
Right, yeah.
I guess that's what I'm asking, your exact question.
Yeah.
Because again, and some of the points that Fillmore raised, there's some things that were done with this quirky thing that have really obstructed the original house. And some of that is cleaned up in a proposed solution. It might tilt the scale in the direction of demolition of this quirky piece. So I'm trying to be fair to the applicant by weighing, I guess, the bigger picture.
That was my question. Did you need to see plans so it warranted a deferral, or could Ashley come up and describe it at this meeting and that would satisfy, so you had an idea?
These sketches.
Yeah,
You'd like
to see
sketches?
something.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
I would
Just
think
asking.
maybe to see something, right?
So then, primarily
Referral
I
for
would
the
say
schematic report.
more
More
information.
requested information and a sense of what would replace.
But when it comes before us at the next meeting, we wouldn't be looking at the proposed plans. We'd still be only looking at demolition.
Right.
There would just be plans submitted.
Right. I mean,
as additional information.
this, I don't know if this makes sense from a procedural standpoint. It just makes sense from a practical standpoint to me.
Yeah, oh, I agree with you. That's why I hope at the city staff level, when we run into these in the future, because this is one we've run into now, this is the second time in just a few months, that it's okay if y'all submit, even though it's not in our purview, if you say, oh, I know you're not looking at it at this meeting, but here's what we're gonna put in its place.
I want to be able to weigh that information because, again, there may be enough merit there for me to potentially tilt the scales on the demolition request. That's all. That makes sense. Okay, so I'll make a motion for deferral for requested information, and also the applicant's opportunity to explain graphically what potentially would be established in its place. If that makes sense.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for deferral for requested information, and the applicant's opportunity to explain graphically what is proposed to replace the structure. Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
I'll second.
Bill, put the motion to a vote. Phil Moore,
In favor?
Bill Huey,
Yeah.
Bill Turner.
Yeah, in favor.
The chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank y'all. Okay, agenda item 4, 186 St. Philip Street. Frankie, to give us an introduction and overview of the project.
186 St. Philip Street is a new project in for Elliottburg Old City District. They're requesting a revision to final approval for proposed changes to windows and doors at the new 3-story mixed-use building. I'm just going to flip through the context slides really quickly because you guys have seen this about 4 or 5 times now. This was the previous structure that we approved demolition of. And some context and information on the site. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Hi, everyone. Ashley Jennings, I'm happy to deny my client, Holder. We're back here again, and this time it's still looking at the windows and the doors. One of the things that we did in our earlier presentation on this design was to look at a flat top window and door element, and we were convinced by Julia Martin to reconsider that and to look at an arch top window and door throughout the project. Very happy to consider it, and we actually were moving forward with the design that way. And what we learned in the process of starting to put together all of the ordering on the windows and doors and elements is that the Marvin product that we had specified as an arch top is not an impact on the door. So the segmented arch on the Marvin door, if we can get it in the 1955, we cannot get it and impact the door. And what that means then is that we need to change the door. We don't want to put a DP rated window or door on this project because we don't want to put fasteners. We have to install some sort of covering because of the way that I think it would just think it's a bad idea on this project. So what we'd like to ask the board tonight is if we could reconsider the arch top on the doors and the windows, put a flat top there, and then go back to the detail that we proposed originally, which was a brick infill under the arch, which you see in a lot of properties right now. There's an example of it at the Cigar Factory. It's newer construction. It's on the Preservation Society's building on King Street. So you would have a running bond, of course, that fills in that segmented arch of the step on top of the window door. And so that's the proposal tonight, is just to square off the tops of the windows and doors and infill with black. And if the board really wanted to keep the arch element, we think we can get the arch top windows in a impact, just the doors that cause a problem. So we just decided to make the proposal rather than mismatch. That's the proposal tonight.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Can you just point out the doors versus how many doors we're talking
Oh, sure. So you see the doors on the balcony here
about?
and these up here.
Have you looked at any other sources besides Marvin for that?
Originally, we were looking at Sierra Pacific, but Sierra Pacific has a true wraparound arch that they can provide. We looked originally at a custom orange top with Sierra Pacific, but they did not make that impact rate.
Because I was thinking more like, a Brannon or a product like that.
I have not looked at any other products other than Sierra Pacific and Marvin.
Thinking Brannon could make an arch top impact over Brannon doors. I'm just naming a company, and there are others, but I'm not trying to Kleenex the
Marvin had looked at that, tested it. They're a big company.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if potentially there may be other options to make the arch top impact doors. Rather than, obviously Marvin's a great company, but there may be other sources to accomplish what you've drawn. That's what I was wanting to see if that had been vetted.
One of the issues that we need to consider is the color of the cladding. We had originally proposed green or moss green. The intent is to take all of the cladding on those windows that are above that cornice to have the same color, consistent color there. So that would be a concern from me. We started to kind of conceal the brand of the window and the doors.
Yeah, it would probably require maybe painting the doors, color that. But I guess it's hard to make a decision based on what one manufacturer can do. When I know there are other options for manufacturing potentially to get the approved look. So that's the only reason why.
So not mixing and matching with another manufacturer to do the windows and doors?
Yeah, you can. One's a door, one's a window, and you can, if it's possible to source what was approved, I just want to make sure that, the potential of getting those made is, the research has been exhausted to find out if those can be made, because I suspect they could be made by a different manufacturer. So that's the question at hand for me is, I understand one manufacturer can't do it, but it's hard to say we would change all the fenestration, everything on the building, because one manufacturer can't make something. Or maybe another one can. So that's why I asked the question. We're still in the question part, but that's why I asked it.
One other we have reached out to one other manufacturer, Windsor, and they can make it, but they are not a big fan of the product. And when you get into, and even with the Marvin, when you get into the fiberglass cladding on the Ultimates, the color selection's down to like 6 to 8 colors, I think. And I'm sure anything can be made, but to get it, you'd end up having to paint everything, and you're going to end up with a strange combination of windows. Sierra Pacific can also make it, but they only do a full radius for the doors, and having a full radius with a segmented arch did not seem like a good look. So this, and also, you know, in the magazines, all these arches that we were looking at and thought would be good from the beginning, when you get to the showroom and they're in aluminum clad, they look a lot more like a Daniel Island Kiowa type product than the arches you're used to seeing in historic Charleston. So it wasn't only necessarily that we couldn't, I'm sure we could find the material if we looked everywhere, and I think the color will be an issue, but it's also that it's not the look we expected from what we were looking at online with the product.
Any other questions?
Yes, that's why I was looking at it. You're talking to the big box boys, and so it might be a more direct source like a Brandon or something like that that make impact orders all the time.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's probably possible to find almost anything. I think that it's the windows, you probably have to match with them, and I don't know, I'm not familiar with that brand. Is it aluminum clad or?
Wood.
It's wood. And see, I'm
Made in Georgia.
that sounds really nice, but I'm not a big fan of putting wood in masonry.
That's a solid spray.
Still, it's a lot of maintenance. It's not what it's go.
I'm just saying, yeah, we have something approved, and we would be looking at potentially changing it because one manufacturer can't make it. That's what I'm trying to say. But is it available? I think it's available from any source.
Yeah, I think it's that as well as the look for us, and additionally, it is what was approved, but conceptually, this was approved. We made these changes later on based on requests, and the thought that it would look really traditional when we started looking at the stuff in the showroom, it wasn't gonna. We should have looked at the stuff in person before we came back for final. We would have had this proposal before we had final.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, there was no written public comment submitted. Do we have anyone speaking from the public? All right. Frank, if you'll give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observations, proposal is to change the previously approved arch windows and doors to rectangular. This is yet another loss in detail on a building that needed to be and was approved, rich with detailing. Applicant to confirm if the exterior of the parapet wall at the north is changing or if this is a graphical error. Staff recommendation is denial of proposed window and door alterations.
Thank you, Frankie. Did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the city staff comments and recommendations?
We're not proposing to change anything else.
Okay. Just windows and doors. All right, thank you. Public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Questions you ask, I think that the detailing on this building is critical. It's a really attractive building. I think if you start toning down detailing, it detracts from it. I think there was a lot of discussion about the art windows and doors at the beginning of this process. And I think that there needs to be more homework done before I would support this change at this stage. I think there is more homework that can be done.
I don't remember all the deliberations on the building, but I know the building came through review a few times. I think one of the original concepts was a lot richer in detail, as you mentioned, and I think some of the later iterations were simplified. And I'm trying to remember, and I can't speak for Julia. I'm trying to recall perhaps the suggestion of archtop was sort of a trade-off for maybe some simplification in other areas. I wish you were here to address that. So I'll just say that it's hard to say that to vote to change all the openings on a building because one manufacturer can't make it when others can. Now, if they research it and find that they can't be made at all, and I'm totally mistaken, I'll definitely weigh that. But if that's true, I'd like to see if there's some way they could get some statement that they can be made. I'm fairly positive they can be made. So, yeah.
I think you had a good question. It would just be nice to have the research done and know whether these windows are available in that market.
I wasn't here for the initial reviews.
Actually, I think Ashley even stated the windows are available.
That was the doors. Okay.
But the applications that I understand is for windows and doors. So there is a product available to do what was approved and drawn. And the doors, because they're potentially not available, are dragging the windows down with it. I don't say down, but they're changing the windows with it. So, yeah. I mean, I would entertain hearing if further research is done. There's some reason that these doors can't be found with impact rating and the archtops that were approved. But right now, we're looking at a denial. We're back to that denial deferral thing. Like procedurally, I've never quite gotten that straight. Denial is a connotation of when you can come back and what you can do versus deferral. Is that, am I wrong in that?
We actually, it won't affect when they can come back.
When they can come back?
Not at our board, actually. They
Not at
don't
our
have-
board, okay.
It's not like
I guess I'm
zoning
dealing
where
with too many words.
there's no like 6 month
Yeah.
sort of timing.
Okay.
But on this one, I think you could do either one. We could do deferral for additional.
I would call it a
information.
deferral. Just a deferral for the applicant to, I'll make a motion for a deferral for the applicant to investigate other avenues for products that would accomplish the approved design.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for deferral, for the applicant to investigate other avenues for products that would accomplish the approved design. Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion?
I'll second.
I'll put the motion to vote. Bill Turner?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey?
Yeah.
Bill Moore?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Bill. Okay, agenda item 5237 Cumming Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction and overview of the project, please.
237 Cumming Street is a category 4 in Canberra, Circuit 1850 in the Old City District. They're requesting conceptual approval for a new rear addition. This is the property's location on Cumming Street. Some existing site photos. Context of Cumming Street. Architecture inventory from 1985. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. April McGill. I'm the architect on this project, representing Kiara and Paris, who own this residence at 237 Cumming.
We site plan. If you view the existing site plan, the building has an existing rear addition, non-historical rear addition that we have received staff approval for demolition. And so we're proposing the site plan on the bottom of the screen. You can see the hyphen that is essentially the same footprint, almost the same footprint as the existing piece that we're demoing. And then there is a new construction piece just to the rear of that. As Frankie mentioned, the new construction is not visible from the street. And this floor plan view shows the existing rear addition and then the proposed new. And we've also received preliminary zoning approval for the new construction. And from the street view, you can see that the new work is not visible. And on the rear, on the bottom right, you can see the new proposed new construction, 2-story piece of the building. And here you can see the existing, the tiny portion of that existing rear piece that will be demolished, and the proposed new. We have worked with the city architect and BAR staff, and as well as both of our preservation groups, and have taken all of their suggestions into account. We have reduced the height as much as possible on the rear, so that we can keep the height of the new below the existing building. And this is the view from the other side. The top elevation is existing, and then the bottom is the proposed new. And here again, you can see from the street side, the new construction is not visible except for on the right, very back right side, adjacent to the neighbor's garage. That's really the only piece that will be visible from one portion of the sidewalk view.
Thank you. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
Visibility, the left side, that's not visible from Cumming Street, so from the sidewalk. Because that's the first side, because the first floor porch remains open and extends past the body of the house. You can see it through the piazza.
Yeah. So,
There's also
Standing on Cumming Street,
the
you can see it
tree
through the
is also masking the view, which is
We
not
can't
shown.
take landscaping into account.
I know you can definitely see the north side when I was out there. But I think you could see a portion of the side, south side through the
yeah.
Any other questions? Bill, you good? Oh, Huey.
Yeah, I'm good. Touched on the Turner, but too many bills.
Thank you. I shouldn't have said Bill, right?
Needed to go through your village.
Okay, there was no written public comment submitted. Do we have anyone speaking? All right, Frank, if you give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observations, staff appreciate that the proposed addition is stepped in from the existing structure. Conditions of approval, new additions should not be wider than the main body of house. Proposed extends as far as the piazza on south elevation. Reconfigure addition to pull in the width. Staff suggests talking to zoning to investigate a variance for rear addition to accomplish proposed changes. Excuse me. Siding on hyphen should be differentiated from existing house and could be made the same or similar to rear portion of addition. Staff recommendation is deferral for restudy and meet with zoning.
Ms. McGill, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the staff comment?
The reason for the bump in on that side, it's not zoning that's driving it, it's the fire separation distance requirements in the IRC. The neighbor's garage, as you can see, comes to roughly the 0 lot line. And so we have a fire separation distance for the building and the eaves. So I don't know that that's something zoning.
I think what Tori meant was extending it further back this way instead of this way, if that makes sense. If I'm reading her comment correctly.
And then the siding, since this is just conceptual approval, we plan to submit for final with all our materials. So at this time, I don't know if siding matters for high scale MS, but we can certainly look at that. And I think we can also look at the proportion of that width if we need to.
Thank you.
One quick question. Since you have that I asked before. The roof, since it's called out, the roof material, new addition, is metal. It's called that a roof roof. Is it standing seam or is it 5 feet?
Again, I'm not sure. We are not quite to that level of detail yet. We have retained Rockwell Construction for the work, so we'll be working with them, meeting budget and as well as aesthetics and our requirements. So we'll be back for final details.
Great, thank you. Okay, applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
Well, I think the overall, the footprint of the building, I agree with Frankie that the south side could come in, and so that it doesn't read as wide as the piazza. But on the flip side of that, I also feel like that's going to be minimally visible. You will see it to the piazza, there will be things visible. So I'm a little bit on the depends on that. We just mentioned about the siding. What I don't think is worth, two things I don't think is working on siding. One is the comment that Frankie mentioned about the hyphen. It reads as the same profile as the main building. But what concerns me more is when you look at the opposite side, since there's no plane change there, you have lap siding abutting the board back. And I think that's a kind of a messy detail there. So I would if we're on the subject of siding, I would rather see one material on the whole thing than see, material change, just happen, without a plain change on that north side.
North side.
And, brought up the B crimp. I would prefer to see it probably standing seam. Because we've all talked in the past about that's a difficult thing to detail with a B crimp when you get to hip ridges. It's very messy. It's not a good material for that. So I would encourage you to look at something other than just the 5B crimp, good standing seam. With it being, in addition, I would rather see a shingle than I would see the V crimp. So, but my preference, of course, was standing seam. I think that's it.
Yeah, I guess real quick on the siding, seeing as Anthony was talking about the fire rating and seeing on the drawings is mentioning a rated wall along that side, the north side. The only way you're going to be able to come up with a proper wall construction would be probably prescriptive method in the building code. And I think you're going to have a really hard time using wood siding within a 1 hour wall construction using the prescriptive method. So I think there may be a bigger issue at hand with the siding selection, given the route you're taking, establishing a 1 hour rated wall over there too. So that just compounds that same issue. So I think there's a little more that needs to be looked into to that end. Some reduction I think would be to the south projection. I believe would be a positive thing, because I think it is going to be through the piazza, which is pretty much corresponding down the drive at eye level. It's going to be pretty visible. So I like the staff's suggestions of potential techniques to reduce that projection.
The footprint could come in a little bit. I think it would be difficult without going back to get that footprint actually time to not past the body of the main house. It's just, there's not much space left there.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it could come in a little bit across visibility.
Yeah.
Might also, you really see that.
It's kind of like it's kind of like you could
Take
take.
out the proportion a little bit, but you're really not going to see the proportion.
Yeah, it's kind of like, there's the closets and then there's a bedroom chamber. It might just be the depth of the closets and reduction, and maybe potentially putting the closets to another solution.
And the siding issue and the roof issue would all come back and be sorted out.
Yeah, but that siding issue definitely needs to be vetted, because again, the fire rated component of it, but then the consistency component that Bill raised over there, I think that's a very valid comment. So it would affect more than just potentially the north elevation.
Yeah.
So I think those things need to be kind of maybe vetted, and within that, it would potentially be maybe a restudy of the southward projection of the rear part of the addition there, and then verification of the cladding materials. That would even go to potentially the soffit material, the fascia, all those components in that rated construction are all players in that issue.
I think the roof form, the window placement, all of that, I think it works. It's just figuring out.
Yeah, so from a height scale and mass, I guess I'd mainly be talking about that south projection, but I wanted to bring up the other points because that could come later and might as well look at the whole thing.
I think the comments are helpful to get it all out now.
Yeah.
Everything that went on pre-study.
So I
Were
think
you
staff,
questioning the motion?
well, I was gonna go back and read, I think staff's comments were addressing some of these points.
That addresses your resetting of the center projection.
Yeah, staff comment 1 addresses that, correct? But yeah, staff comment 2 and 3. So yeah, I'll make a motion for deferral for restudy and to meet with zoning with staff's conditions for approval. That's what it says. So is that comments, same thing?
Same thing.
Same thing, staff comments.
They're trying to make all the board use consistent terminology.
Okay, staff's conditions for approval. I guess we need to start saying that.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy, to meet with zoning and, deferral for restudy and to meet with zoning, potentially. With staff conditions for approval. Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion?
Second.
Thank you. Motion to vote, Fillmore,
And,
Bill Huey,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Turner.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
What's the, could you explain again the zoning piece, what we're meaning with zoning?
I think it would be a variance if you're going to
Further.
encroach into the setback. So if you
Rear
do,
setback?
the rear setback, that's right. So if you did restudy in it,
I think it would be a slimming, but then maybe a little more of a projection towards the rear.
Yeah.
I think that was that's the nature of the comment.
that would be the potential zoning conversation you would have if you chose to incorporate that comment. Okay, agenda.
Just so you know, but we've made it the motion that way before, so that if you do have to go to zoning, you can show them the VAR motion to help support your argument.
Agenda item 6 is 549 King Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
549 King Street is a Category 3 in Canterbury, Elliott Borough, circa 1900 in the Old and Historic District. They're requesting conceptual approval for a 2-story rear addition. This is the property's location on King Street. Existing site photos. Architecture inventory from 1985. And we will turn it over to the applicant.
Neil Stevenson, representing the owners of the business that is going into 549 King Street. And this is the group out of New York called they're the Dead Rabbit Group, and they're actually won best cocktail bar in the world like 2 years in a row. And the guy who branded it had another bar in Belfast that also was best bar in the world. So these guys are, serious about it. This previous use of this building, well, actually, it kind of transitioned into a bar after the public house, which is like the worst place on King Street. That's where like all the college kids would be puking at night, and I think there was some gunshots and what's anyway, so it's good to have like real guys in here who are going to run to a serious real bar. It's going to be a Irish pub. And so they're renting the entire ground floor. Halfway through the design, they realized they didn't have enough. They have a tremendous amount of equipment. So we scurried, and they basically rented the back part of 555 King, which is a little one-story Chinese restaurant. But then that was just an open lot. So we're proposing to build a just simple 2-story building. It's in the middle of the block. I think the closest that you can see it is down a driveway, narrow driveway, like 260 something feet. So I was trying to get staff approval, but because it's such a, it's hardly going to be seen by anybody. I don't even know if what you see, you're just going to really see kind of the roof. But anyway, I'm just here to get some feedback on what you all have to say. We're going for like a super simple building. It's built on the property line. There's not much availability for even windows. This is basically, they realize that all their equipment in New York is in the basement. And so this is like it's a utilitarian building that's just kind of poking up in the middle of a bunch of other stuff that's happening in the middle of the block. And there's also a lot of construction going on, so I think that even the views that you can see now are probably going to be closing out in the next few years. Not that that means anything, but it's just a basic building. We're talking about concrete block with a 3/4 inch stucco and a architectural shingle roof. Okay, they can't hear what you have to say.
Any questions for the applicant?
Just one. Are you planning on anything to the front of the building? I noticed maybe some signage changing.
On King Street?
Yeah, anything major?
No. Okay. We had, the signage that they have now is pretty much what they're probably going to keep. Okay.
Also, it looks like there's a pretty major food component to what's going on. You have, is anything going to be visible by way of dumpsters, anything like that would require screening?
I'm sorry.
Dumpsters, things like that would require screening?
No, I mean, it's all in the back there. And there's a 10-foot fence on that parking lot that's back there. That'll block anything below that. So really, we'll just see kind of a roof structure.
Freshfield, what's happening in the upper floor of the two-story?
So they've got bar, research and development, and then the downstairs is their kitchen prep. Okay.
So
okay.
Will we be seeing anything coming up the second floor roof, which is thought would be visible?
No. It's just a simple parapet. All of the equipment and everything is going down on the lower one-story.
All right, so no exhaust or anything?
No. Yeah, they're not cooking in there at all.
Kitchen is like a prep test kitchen.
Yeah, the main
For
kitchen
drinks.
is there's a one-story part of the building that you can't see, but that's basically there's going to be a hood on the property that you can't see right away.
I noticed on the roof of the two-story addition, one side has overhang, the other side of the roof is that for water? Is that for runoff?
Well, and
Capture or something?
One of the things that's happened is we've had to move the building onto the property line, so we're actually going to eliminate the eave on probably both sides, but one side we're about 3.5 feet from the property line, the other side we're on the property line, so not really allowed to hang. Overhang.
So you're overhanging the property line.
Yeah.
Good gutters there.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We have no written public comments submitted. Do we have anyone speaking?
Lauren Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Upon review of this application, the PSC feels more information is needed to understand the scope of this proposal. First, the drawings do not meet submittal requirements. Existing elevations are missing from the set, and notes are insufficient throughout. Additionally, while this request is advertised as a proposal for a two-story addition, the drawings show significant demolition and reconstruction of the existing rear portion of the building that warrant further explanation. Based on the information available, the addition appears to be a largely utilitarian structure, in which case we would encourage reducing height as much as possible and feel the tall gable roof form is unnecessary. This is a complicated site, and we ask for deferral for the applicant to provide clearer drawings that properly illustrate what is being proposed. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else speaking? Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, there's a lot of drawings showing storefronts and with callouts, colors, and material, but no storefront alterations were included in the application. Proposed single-story and first-story work or alterations at rear are not visible, while proposed second-story work will be minimally visible from Morris and Cannon Streets. No wall sections are included in submittal, so I think there was a request for preliminary approval. But we didn't have the criteria for preliminary review. Staff conditions of approval: consider lowering the pitch of the roof or consider a hip roof to help mitigate visibility concerns, if any, by board of the new two-story structure behind one-story structure on King Street. Applicant to explain why the north side of the proposed two-story structure indicates an overhang while the south side does not, and to consider making the roof edge condition the same for both. Staff recommendation is a conceptual approval with staff conditions.
Thank you, Frankie. Neil, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment and city staff comments?
Yeah, sure. Yes, we did get approval to demolish the back kitchen house, which is, the kitchen house is, it's not a kitchen house, it was a concrete block building, non-reinforced. We were just tearing it down and rebuilding it to be reinforced, and so it'll stand. And we'll hold equipment on the roof, which is hidden behind the parapet, but it's basically just kind of rebuilding a one-story building that's not historical.
Okay, thank you. All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I did a good bit of walking around there. It's like Frankie says, you're not gonna see any first floor elements, and you're gonna see just minimal of the second floor. And he's keeping it as a very simple building. It's kind of a background building, or to speak. I have no problem with the roof form because it sits so far back, either streets.
I guess I'm wondering,
It might go ahead, it's lot line to lot line, basically. It's easier to control the water with a different roof.
that's what I was wondering, why it's not potentially maybe a shed roof to one side and a little like parapets or something like that. You could contain all the watershed to one direction. And it would lower the height quite a
Does
bit.
he's cut off it, you're gonna need a big gutter.
Percent aesthetically, doesn't bother.
Yeah.
Functionally, yeah, I agree.
Well, I'm saying aesthetically too, because actually that roof form could potentially lower the entire mass down
That's
quite
true.
a bit, rather than a projecting gable with a pretty decent pitch on it, by the way.
So it would be even more minimally visible.
It's just being out there, it is so far off either street.
Yeah, I'm just thinking rethinking that roof a little bit might be a win in more ways than one.
Yeah, practically and visually.
Yeah.
Because it looks like it's probably about an 8 to 12 pitch on that thing. Gets on up there. And to whatever degree, to some degree, I agree with the statements that Laura made on behalf of Preservation Society. There is a little bit of confusion as to the extent of work. I'm not quite grasping all of what potentially is going on here, and that makes me always a little bit uncomfortable voting for something that I don't completely get my head around. But I believe it could be potentially just a little bit more data, and I would think maybe more information about the entirety of what's proposed, be alterations and new construction, and a restudy of the roof form will be the two things.
I struggled with the drawings.
Yeah.
I spent a long time trying to figure out exactly, and I think I finally got it in my
I
head.
spent a very long time.
So, and the one thing that was mentioned that is not here that really should be is this, there are no existing, they're not existing drawings to compare. So, I don't have fundamentally, I think I've got my head around it and I don't really have any problem with it other than I think it would be smart to restudy the roof.
Yeah, it took me a while to wrap my head around, but I eventually figured it out.
But I drawings are not as complete as they should be for our purview.
Or maybe a deferral, for, refinement of the drawings to more clearly define the entire scope of work and restudy of the roof form would be the right motion. Well,
Did you make that motion?
I guess I just did. Oh, and, I think the roof form, restudy the roof form, and I think our deliberation was mentioning potentially a shed with a low parapet, which would lower the entire roof form. I would find that even more of merit than potentially even a hipped roof restudy. So I don't know if I want to include staff's comment. Not. Or so indicates that overhang looks out does not consider making the roof in ash condition. I'll just not include staff comment.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor for deferral, for refinement of the drawings to understand the scope of work, and restudy of the roof form with staff condition for approval too.
Yeah, and then I think Fillmore made I believe in that refinement of drawings would include existing condition drawings, right? Existing condition drawings. And
So refinement of drawings to
Yeah.
include
the existing condition drawings, which are a submittal requirement anyway, so. There we go.
Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion? Put the motion to a vote. Turner?
Yeah.
Bill Huey?
Yeah.
Fillmore? Chair votes a majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Can I clarify, when you say include existing conditions, does that mean your photographs or drawings of the existing, just the existing building?
It's kind of the existing, I guess to say, because you were discussing there might be some modifications to part of the existing footprint somewhere or
It should be
building
in the
somewhere.
drawings. But
Okay.
I'll go back through and I'll
Yeah.
pull that out.
Yeah, just make them as clear as you can. Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 7 is 11 Lowndes Street. Frank, you could give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
11 Lowndes is not surveyed in Charleston in the Old and Historic District, requesting conceptual approval for a new 2.5-story single-family home and renovation of an existing historic garage. This is the property's location on Lowndes Street. Existing site photos. Context of Lowndes. Same one map showing the existing garage. And I will turn it over to the applicants.
Good evening, Sebastian von Marshall. I am presenting this on behalf of John B. Murray Architects in New York City, who is the design architect and the architect of record on this project. Thank you, BAR staff, BAR board, as always. This is the second time you're seeing this project for conceptual review. It was deferred at a meeting back in June. So what I'd like to do is really focus on two things. The precedent and the changes that have been made to address the board and the staff comments from the last meeting. So if you could, Frankie, please jump to the precedent images of the board slides. One more. There we go. Thank you. So these four buildings on Gibbs and South Battery, as you can see from the area map, are within sort of a 3-block radius of the site. They were all completed, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years. This board reviewed and approved those. And in considering the board revision comments, the board and staff comments from the last meeting, I believe John's office was really drawing heavily on these to get massing, detailing, articulation to be very much in keeping with what has previously been reviewed and approved. So window surrounds, brick molds, porticos on the front, the roof shape, those kinds of things were all studied pretty closely. Then diving into the board and the staff comments from last time, thank you. Forward slide. I think the first staff comment had been the articulation of the portico. Maybe easier to see these in the front elevation. I think previous proposed. Next slide. I'm just going to skip to the plans. Previous, proposed. I think these pop up better on the elevation. Yep, there we go. Okay. So this was the previous elevation. If you could skip forward one more slide to the next elevation. There we go. So the first thing was that portico we talked about. It previously had a parapet on it. It had columns on pedestals. It had a fairly ornate railing. The stairs was much more complex. It had, I think, what was referred to as very coastal style piers. All that has been kind of changed, again, to be a little bit more in keeping with the precedent. It has now a simple hip roof, full columns, a simple metal railing, a solid masonry base below. I think a little bit more in keeping with an urban aesthetic that some of the board members had alluded to. Second staff comment and a board comment, this was a big one, lowering the house, the first finished floor to design flood. So we've done that, it's come down 10 inches, so that first finished floor is now at design flood elevation. And it brings the whole mass of the building down as well, which is nice. Obviously, the house is still raised. Design flood is 13 feet here. I think the adjacent grade is at 4.5. So, for better or for worse, that finished floor is going to be 8.5 feet above the sidewalk on a new construction. Now, the architect has looked closely at how to reduce the impact of the height as much as possible. They kept their floor to ceiling heights, I think, fairly reasonable for the board's judgment. Obviously, I think the first floor is about 10 feet. The second floor might be 8.5. The attic floor is maybe 8 feet or so. So drop to DFE. Then the next comment had to deal with the complexity overall of the roof and the dormers. You can see that the dormer on the front of the house was removed altogether. If you, Frank, you could go back one slide, please. There we go. So you can see, again, just a lot going on there. And then on the next slide, if you go forward one again, you can see how everything sort of becomes a little more quiet. It's just a simple hip roof. There are still two dormers on the side. Those were detailed. The detailing was changed a little bit. Their articulation to simplify them, also to kind of tie them together so they essentially are speaking the same language. The one on the left is rectilinear. The one on the right is elliptical. And that is actually to reduce the mass of that dormer. So on that half story, if you had a rectilinear dormer on that side, it would actually be bigger. It looks actually, it's a little whimsical, I understand, but it actually tapers as you move away. So it helps to reduce the overall mass of that roof a little bit. And then lastly, I think there were comments about the overall appearance, just how it presented itself. I think I addressed some of that. Again, that previous slide to this slide is very telling about how everything has been sort of simplified a little bit, reduced, and I think brought very much more into a line with what has previously been done and what the board has previously seen and approved for other precedent projects nearby, other infill houses that have gone up in this neighborhood. We have been in touch with the Preservation Society, with the George Charleston Foundation. They've seen the revised drawings. The feedback we got from them was mostly positive about most of those changes. We've also been in touch with a lot of the neighbors and have met with some of them and had, I think, very positive conversations about the direction, the improvements that were made. The one last thing I'd like to mention is just, sorry, I'm going back a little bit here. The massing of the house, what I'd like to focus on really quickly. Sorry, I skipped over this, but I'm looking at the elevation now. The bulk of the mass of that building was really intentionally centered on the middle of the lot to try to keep the height of the roof away from either side. So what you can see on the left-hand side there, that little projection, that's only a 2-story volume. So the idea is to kind of try to step. Actually, if we go to the street elevation, Frank, if you go to this one more. There we go. Exactly. Oh, previous. Next one. Sorry, no, other way. There we go. So you can see that the height of that building, they're trying to bring it down with only a two-story portion on the left there next to the neighbors. And again, we see that we're obviously slightly higher than the adjacent structures. Again, we're elevated for flood. But if we weren't, I think this house would basically be essentially the same height as the buildings immediately adjacent. I mentioned the PSC. I think that's it. Welcome any questions you have. Thank you so much.
Any questions for the applicant? Do we have anyone speaking from the public? Go ahead, and I'll read the public comment after. I want to see if these neighbors can. Go ahead.
I'm going to read yours first.
If any of these neighbors that submitted comments are going to speak, then I won't read them, so go ahead.
I did send in one letter. I'm a little Shiver. My wife Jane and I was at 7 Mile Street, which is the house right to the left of the building. First of all, I want to thank, or let you guys know how much I appreciate the Sonic that actually came to our house, presented their revised plans to us, and I must say we were very pleased with the changes that we did see, especially the front, and the front dormer being gone, and then the stairs are much improved. However, and they did drop it, a foot per you guys' request, but we are still very concerned with the overall height, which is basically this additional half story. I've been trying to find another house in the general area with 3.5 stories, struggling to find one. 2.5 was the approved amount when I actually looked at the lot when I bought my house in 2020. It's since raised to allow 3 stories. The owners are asking for 3.5. I think it's a bridge too far. It's towering over our house. It's over the other house. It'll be the highest house in the neighborhood. It's a pretty house. It's a grand house. And there are many grand homes in Charleston. Lounge Street is a more modest street. It's not Legree, it's not Church, but we love the street. Most of our neighbors live there full time. It is a very family, everybody's, at the end of the day, we see each other, and it's just a very cohesive neighborhood. It's not a second home area. People aren't buying it because of their grand big homes. It's a wonderful, special neighborhood. So we just feel that the plans as they're presented are a bit out of place. Just the sizing, the height, the massing of it. Also, the ellipse dormer we feel is not in keeping with the neo-colonial architecture in the adjacent houses on the street, really on Gibbs. The first floor ceilings they share with us are 10 feet, which is more than we have, more than most homes in the neighborhood have. I feel maybe that could be a concession in the height. But number one, I think it is the half story, and just the overall size and massing of the house, which brings up drainage. As we all know, this is a lower part of the peninsula. It's infill. Lounge Street will turn into a river during hurricanes, tropical storms, and even some big summer storms. And with that lot that has always been just an empty lot, absorbing all that water, it's just going to push more water onto the street, onto the abutting neighbors. So we'd like that to be taken into consideration in regards to the massing and the sizing of the structure. Instead of taking advantage of every possible square foot allowed by the setbacks and the zoning, we would ask you guys to consider to maybe scaling it down some, just to be more in keeping with our street, our neighborhood. It's a modest street. It's not Daniel Island where you can build as big as you want, and whatever materials you want, with as many windows as you want. We're also concerned about the west elevation, the number of windows. Our kitchen is going to face their kitchen, so we'll be washing dishes, looking at each other, waving, as it's proposed right now. And there is no space for any kind of green fencing in between the two. Part of the reason is because I have the easement on the driveway between the two. So the driveway belonged to 11, or still belongs to 11 legally, and the owner that sold me 7 would not sell the driveway, he would only give me an easement because you have to have a certain number of linear feet on the road to have a buildable house, which is fine. So I get the driveway, but that house is it's built on the setback based on the property line, which is maybe 2 or 3 feet from my house. And so the structure is so large, it's going to appear too cramped to our house because the setbacks that it's based off of are actually closer to the house than it would be normally, which would be based off of a driveway, which is where a normal property line would go. So I ask you to look at that as well when you're considering the plans, just how close it is going to be to our house with the general size that is presented of this home. I don't know if this is your guys' purview, but the driveway, I believe, should be made of pervious materials since I would say 80% of this lot is covered with impervious materials. It's got a pool house, swimming pool. It's got a room off the back, which I think houses a study of some sort. The additional half floor is also going to take away natural sunlight from our house. Our house, the sun sets directly over where this proposed house is going to be, so it's going to eliminate a lot of natural light that we get in our house, which we obviously enjoy. The other house has currently a lot of mildew growth on it, and I can imagine what it's going to be like with all the sunlight the little sunlight it gets now is going to be taken away by the height of the structure. So we're going to have more humidity and less sunlight in these areas. Those are our main comments. I appreciate the forum. You guys allow us to get up here and voice our concerns. As the plans that are currently presented, we request that you deny them. Thank you very much.
Do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Pralo, and I am at 5 Lowndes, and I've been a neighbor there for 16 years. And really, I think Bill pretty well covered most everything as far as the concerns that I and a lot of the other neighbors have. And I think the improvements have been considerable, and I also appreciate the VAR working with the architects and having them refine a lot of the problems that we saw with the initial plans. It certainly is simplified, which looks a little more appropriate for our street, but I also would say that it's a very simple street, and I think initially the house looks like it belonged on Daniel Island. That has been cleaned up, but not entirely. And I think the idea of the elliptical window, and I see where a few of these details are coming from, because on South Battery, where you have deeper lots, larger lots, you have a couple of successful classic examples of architecture where some of the details in this house are very similar, but you have bigger spaces where those details were used. And I think in fact, the elliptical window, it may be useful as far as breaking up the roof space, but it is unattractive, and it doesn't look like a little downtown street in Charleston. I think had you wanted a larger house, it's unfortunate that there was not either buying a larger house on the street like LaGree or South Battery, or, somewhere where a bigger house is appropriate. And I also understand that they're limited by, a small lot. But the unfortunate part of that is because that lot is small, and because all of it is almost the whole lot is going to be covered with the surface, that again, as they mentioned, if you look at this lot from front to back, it is very difficult to add any sort of landscaping, greenery, for something that would mediate this large size. So I realize that, you know, not every house on Lounge Street is an architectural marvel, and that's certainly, you know, something that somebody from out of town might, you know, want to point out. But, you know, it is the way that the neighborhood has developed, and it is a, you know, a small, quaint street. And I understand that also, that's because I'm in the design field, that someone builds a house and to you know, capitalize on their investment. I get that, but I just don't think that this is, I think it's greatly improved, but it's still not where it should be. It should still be, you know, simplified where it can be. I think that elliptical window is just so out of place and inappropriate. And I think, you know, there are other aspects of this design that need to be toned down just a little to fit into our little small street and look even remotely appropriate. Thank you for your time, and thank you for letting me speak.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public?
Laurel Bay with the Preservation Society Charleston. The PSC appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this project and feels the reduction in height and revisions to the front elevation are significant improvements. In particular, the reworked stair and removal of the front dormer simplifies and enhances the architectural language of the primary elevation. We suggest carrying this over to the west elevation, where the elliptical dormer continues to complicate the roof structure. In keeping with our previous comments, we also encourage reducing the width of the eastern mass on the front elevation to read more as a secondary massing, reflective of traditional narrow porch proportions, as well as the garage openings on the west elevation. And lastly, we would again recommend against the proposal to add a monitor to the historic garage in an effort to preserve the structure as the last historic remnant on the site. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking? All right, we have a couple of written public comments. One from Carol Kelly at 16 Gibbs. I'm very concerned about the size and appearance of the proposed structure. As you know, this is a very small lot. The size of the house is overwhelming. In addition, I'm asking that you be very cautious in improving the design. Our neighborhood is quite quaint and unique. Nothing in the neighborhood stands out as an anomaly. Also, there are several nearby homes that will need total remodeling in the near future. I would hate for this house to set an example and change the fabric of our neighborhood. Thank you. Also from Nicholas and Kevin Leonard of Lowndes Properties. We are residents of 19 Lowndes Street. Our home is situated 4 doors down from the proposed project. We write to express our concerns regarding the project. To date, we've been provided limited information regarding the proposal. However, after doing our due diligence, we've come to learn that the plans are large and do not seem to take into consideration the character of the neighboring homes in downtown Charleston as a whole. As residents of historic homes, we pride ourselves in preserving the quintessential Charleston charm that South of Broad has so carefully cultivated over the last 100 years. While we understand that there is a time, place, and need for modernization, the VAR is here to ensure that new builds enhance the allure of the neighborhood, not detract from it. We are gravely concerned that the size, style, height, and scale of the proposed Project 11 Lounge will undercut the careful preservation and planning efforts of our city and undermine decades of careful planning by the VAR. We kindly ask the members of VAR to carefully consider whether the proposal is inconsistent with its surroundings. We do not believe it is. Take a leave it is. Notwithstanding the above, we have legitimate concerns for the structural and environmental impact a project of this nature would pose on our street, namely flooding, sunlight, and live oak tree preservation. Neighbors will bear a financial burden of remedying these issues for years to come. Water runoff, notably any hardscaping in the backyard and a lack of gutter systems that ensures 100% drainage to the street, will cause holes in the neighboring homes where piers currently lay. Runoff will cause root rot to 150-year-old live oak trees. We know this because we nearly bought 7 Lowndes Street, but backed out of the deal out of concerns for the impact of a new home that 11 Lowndes would have. 7 Lowndes, before the renovation by the current owners, was already experiencing significant water damage under the house caused by the inability to drain and the natural grading of our street. Holes of depths greater than 4 feet developed under this home. Please remember that Lowndes Street homes are built on a landfill. The size of the proposed project will permanently alter the grading of land and the directional flow of water on our street. The movement of dirt on the property will direct redirect water into neighboring properties, especially if any new dirt or sand is brought to the location. Additionally, we are concerned that the proposed height of the new home is going to cause irreparable damage to the value of surrounding homes. The height should not exceed the height of neighboring homes. The height as currently proposed will decimate the sunlight of nearby homes, and the massive side windows will invade the privacy of abutting homes. Limiting sunlight will amplify the humidity under the already shaded properties at 13 and 15 Lowndes. Adding water as a result of hardscape will further worsen the problem and may potentially cause structural damage to the homes. Further, it is our understanding that the plans currently proposed building extremely close to the lot line on all sides. We believe this is unacceptable as the size of the lot cannot adequately accommodate plans so large and contribute to our environmental concerns. The home at 11 Lowndes should be no wider, no larger, and no taller than 13 Lowndes Street, which is appropriate for the size of the lot. Allowing such a modern new build and a home of this scale on such a small plot would cause the BAR to lose legitimacy in the community. We are pleading with you to stand by your mission to maintain historical and cultural heritage and do the right thing. We have personal experience in renovating a home with the BAR. When we proposed an all-glass back door to our home, the BAR rejected our plans as it felt it did not comply with the historic character of the home. We went through many iterations for a simple door and in the end appreciated the BAR's careful attention to preservation. We're asking you to do the same at 11 Lowndes. We ask that you carefully consider whether the proposal in front of you is consistent with city values, historic charm, and preservation efforts as entrusted in the BAR. Specifically, we ask the home eventually built at 11 Lowndes reflect the dimensions, height, and depth, and specifications of the home at 13 Lowndes. Okay, and that's the end of the written public comment. Frank, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Staff just had an observation that the previous issues have been addressed, most specifically with the simplification of dormers and roof and with a more substantial design for the area beneath the front porch. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with final review by staff of permit drawings.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Ron Marshall, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
Yes, thank you. And what I'd actually like to start with is just apologizing because I guess there's a lot of information that is sort of inherent in this project, and some of that unfortunately doesn't obviously always get passed along to all the other parties. So in an attempt to just help possibly clarify and shine some light on some things that had not previously been specifically addressed. The owner is working with a drainage and landscape consultant to deal with issues regarding trees and site water drainage. It's all within, it all follows the city ordinance and obviously the city tree warden and the floodplain manager will be reviewing current drawings before those go, before the permit is issued. So I hope that addresses those concerns. I think there was a concern about proximity to setbacks, things like that. As the board is aware, this project has previously gone through zoning review, or the zoning staff determined that it meets the letter and the intent of the zoning code for height, setback, and lot coverage. So that has also been addressed. In terms of I think the bulk of the rest of the comments had to deal with just generally the height and the appearance. I agree. I think if you look at just the stretch of Lowndes Street, it's kind of an interesting mix. This whole area, as mentioned, is infill. It's early 20th century. There's a combination of various revival styles. You have some pretty nice colonial revivals actually next door, 7 and 5. They have some pretty intricate woodwork. You have four squares, arts and crafts houses, and then you have some of these newer infill buildings. So it's kind of a bit of a eclectic and diverse neighborhood, which I actually think is charming. I mean, it's not homogenous. It's not just a monoculture of houses. In fact, there are some pretty significant examples of from various periods around. You go a block west, and there's the Parker Drayton House. It's a grade 1 listed building. You go a block up, and it's you have the Shingler House that Glenn Keyes is working on. That's a pretty significant 19th century house. And then, like I mentioned before, a lot of the other precedent structures in the 3-block radius, I think, mirror pretty closely what's being proposed here. Again, I think John's office was, like I said, drawing pretty heavily on those to try to find something that had been done before. And I think in a lot of those cases, the proposed and the new houses share very similar adjacencies with that house next door. So you might have a new house next door to a 1940s four square. So that is, I think, part of the urban fabric there. And then lastly, the height, I realize there may be a bit of a misconception, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2.5 story height is considered above flood. The bottom ground floor, I do not believe is considered is a habitable story. So it would be a 2.5 story house. That height is set by the FEMA required flood elevation of design flood +2, which is at 13 feet. So that kind of sets that ground floor level. And then lastly, I think, the dormers came up again. They're trying to design, I believe they're trying to design it in a way that's going to reduce the overall impact. I think if the shape is a sticking point, then I understand something that's a little unusual. But the goal is actually to help reduce the overall impact of the roof shape and the mass of that building. I think that was it for the comments. If we could really quickly maybe just go back to the last slide in the presentation. I think the masking models do a pretty good job of sort of showing how this building will front on the street. You can kind of see on the left hand there, they've ghosted in the elevation. If you could go back one more slide, right? Sorry to run, but just relative to some of the other buildings, I think a lot of effort was made to try to reduce the mass on the front. Obviously, some of it is sort of stretched down the lot. Obviously, it's a longer, deeper lot than it is wide. So trying to keep in mind and limit that street frontage and that sort of overbearing appearance that we have on the street. If you go back one more slide, I think there's a good example of sort of, let's see, maybe one more slide. That's the previous one more, sorry. Well, that's the previous and four. So you get a bit of a sense of kind of how the mass of the building tucks in there next to some of those other buildings. Thank you.
All right, public comment to the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
I'd start. Well, I appreciate all the neighbors from Lounge Street. Lounge Street's really a cool spot. I always think of it like a little eddy in the river. It's just a nice little setting down there. I appreciate the applicants addressing the comments, especially the sort of simplification and unification of the detailing on the house. It's become quite an issue, obviously, the flood issue that we're all dealing with now, and the establishment of heights that really push a building up quite a bit, but it's kind of what we have to deal with now. And I have the same kind of thoughts when someone comes in to even raise a historic home in context of their neighbors that haven't been raised yet, but inevitably it's an issue. But it's a reality at the same time that just has to be dealt with. And I think in light of that, I have to say that I believe the house is done in a nice way. I feel good about the efforts to address the comments that were made previously. I guess my only question potentially might be if the applicant had considered potentially a different exterior material palette, because maybe one thing that's sort of establishing that maybe the impression of grandeur to the neighbors is the fact that they're looking at sort of a, masonry stucco wall, which is fairly in deference to the other homes in context. Potentially maybe a sided composition might soften that, give more of a feeling of continuity, but from a height, scale, and mass standpoint, and to whatever degree the detailing, I appreciate the efforts, and I think as far as my concerns were previously, they've been addressed in the application.
I think the changes that have been made to the front elevation huge. I mean, it's night and day on those. It was really charted up before. It's greatly simplified. I appreciate that. I do think it's big. brought this up the last time, but then you're having to deal with these FEMA regulations, and I don't know how you can push it down more when regulations are pushing it up. So I don't know how to resolve that, honestly. I think Bill's comment about the material change, I think is spot on. I think that it would blend in, material-wise, it would blend in a lot better if it were, say, a brick structure or even a lap-sized structure. But, like to me, I think it's a nice-looking building. With me, it is the height. I think it's big. It's going to be noticeable, but I don't think there's a resolution to it.
I think I'm in the same opinion. If the houses closest to that were elevated, they would all be about the same height, I think. Some would be a little lower, but I think that what's driving it mostly is the regulations. It's from House Street, it's big, but if you look at the aerial views, you go a couple of houses down and look at the footprint of the roof structure, and there's similar houses within a few houses of this. And so I think a lot of the concerns have been addressed. I do think it's an attractive house. We don't have construction details here, but if it's built right, a stucco house can be a really good choice and a very durable choice. So I'm exactly opposed to that. I think the material palette, if you change it, it would fit in a little better, but I'm not necessarily opposed to it being stucco. But that's not a conceptual issue right now, I don't think. I do think that the radius dormer is a little out of context. However, I think that probably it will look different standing on the street than it does in an elevation drawing. So I'm sure that I think it will probably look better, in fact, than it does on draw.
I think it would actually look worse if you squared it off. It's going to look a lot bigger.
Yeah, a lot of times, elevations don't give you a good perspective of what it will look like. So I don't think I have an issue with the radius dormer.
And nothing to add?
That's, the height issue is just the nature of the beast. It's what we're having to deal with now with the flooding and FEMA regulations. If you took away that and you sat it down on the ground like the rest of the houses, it would be basically the same size.
We've seen this on a few, and it's applications that are purely raising the house, and it looks, we just approved one recently. It was 4 or 5 sister houses, and one's being raised. It is what it is.
The way I look at this, if this were a historic house and it's already built and they were coming in to raise it for flood issues, this is what we would end up with the historic house. If the house next door came into us, the colonial next door, in order to raise for flood reasons, it would probably equal this.
I guess I wondered if, essentially, if I could ask the applicant a question about getting back to that materiality discussion. Could be the origin of the idea to use the stucco, and you are correct, it's being detailed right the way it's called now. Was there ever a discussion about other exterior materials? May I ask that question?
So I apologize. I am not.
It's not okay. I know you're representing.
Yeah, I do apologize.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
I think that is a good board comment, though. I think it's a good study the potential use.
Yeah. Now staff's made a recommendation for approval with final details to staff with full permit points, I think. If there is a comment potentially about entertaining optional exterior materials, that would sort of jump over any review of said discussion of that.
Do you want it to come back
For
to board?
preliminary.
I'm asking you guys what you think.
I would prefer it to come back. I would prefer it to come back. I think it's a substantial project. I think it needs to come more than just a conceptual.
I think particularly if there's going to be a board comment to consider the.
Yeah, because this was a submittal for conceptual anyway, right?
For conceptual.
So by the motion of staff's recommendation, that would have been knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
So I would say,
Did you make a motion for conceptual approval?
for the height, scale, and mass, and I think those points that we've raised about these flood issues and the fact that, it's a modern reality that has to be dealt with. I think that's exactly the point. So I will make a motion for conceptual approval with a board comment to potentially restudy exterior material palette.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with a board comment to potentially restudy the exterior material palette. Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill Turner. I'll put the motion to a vote. Fillmore?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey?
Yay.
Bill Turner?
Yea in favor.
The chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 8 is 10.5 Rutledge Avenue. Frank, you could give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
10.5 Rutledge is not surveyed in Charlestown circa 1915 in the old historic district, requesting hardscape replacement for driveway. This is the property's location on Rutledge. Existing site photos. Sanborn maps. Existing photos, or site photos of adjacent driveways. It says 10 Rutledge, 8 Rutledge, 5.5 Rutledge. We will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, I'm George Scudder, the owner, and we have about a driveway that's about 100 feet long. It's made of old brick, undetermined origin. It is now like driving over a washboard. It's hills and valleys, and in addition to potholes, which makes it a little difficult for the mailman to get a steady pace going back to our mailbox, which is attached to the house. It needs to be replaced, it's not safe. To replace it, we like to use some permeable pavers because that alleviates water runoff. There are walls on either side. The house next to us is firm, it's walled in, the foundation is, and we have a retaining wall on the other side. And so the water just sits there when it rains. And so we like to use permeable pavers to replace what we have there. That's it.
Any questions for the applicant?
I noticed in the submittal that there was a reference to a small retaining wall that was to be built as well.
The driveway has about a 1 foot clearance up rapid rise from the sidewalk. So when you go in, it's like this for about 2 feet. So what we're gonna do is level that out a little bit so that the ground on either side doesn't wash into the driveway when it rains.
What would be the material?
Same as the paver material.
It would be the same.
Right. And I have a sample of that, not the exact color, but a sample of that product if you'd like to look at it.
Just real quick on that. So what you were saying is you're going to sort of protract the slope back a little further. I think that's, I just want to make sure I heard what you said. So you're going to take that steep slope and sort of protract it back a little
Yes,
further.
we're
Okay.
expressing
That's
that
gonna-
from two,
It's gonna
from one
require a
foot
couple
to maybe 3 feet.
Okay.
And then we want to make sure that the ground that's there doesn't wash in.
Right.
So we need to hold it back.
Gotcha.
This is the material. It's a good, heavy, it's permeable. It's going to be set with crushed whatever the gravel is that they put in there so the water runs right down. And you can put water through this also. Because we're very conscious of, as the previous applicant was saying, water is a problem in Charleston.
Any other questions?
And as they, I noticed there were a number of color options here. Had you chosen the color?
Yes, as close to what we have as possible. What we have right now is a combination of this. And we thought, oh, could we save the old one? Well, no, because that would be an impossible job. You probably wouldn't save much of it because it's going to flake and break. And it's all set in roughly this amount of gravel stuff. I don't know when it was done, but I think it was done on the weekends. But we're going to be as close to this as we possibly can. I think we've used the New Carolina in the proposal, which I think is pretty close to this. We looked at it over at one of the nurseries where they have it, and it's pretty close. Anything else? Thank you.
All right, we had no written public comments submitted. Do we have anyone speaking? Okay, Frank, you could give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, so for board information, really the reason we're bringing this to the board is we have some conflicting policy statements. I know. So regardless of what we follow, we're opposing something else. So we have policies that talk about materials being of quality commensurate with Charleston's architectural heritage. And we also have one stating that pervious paving materials are desirable, and where concrete is permitted, it shall not be worked to imitate other materials. So we don't know how to approve a pervious material that has been made to look like brick without opposing our own policy statement. Staff discussed with the applicant using the existing brick, repairing and reusing the existing brick, so we understand the issue there. So we're bringing this to you guys for you to help us out with this policy statement and establish a new precedent for these going forward. We know a lot of these driveways have been prepared with bricks like this.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to or clarify anything, or we can just go straight into board discussion?
As in some of the slides, our neighbors have, in many cases, concrete with a few pavers outlining the area, which is used throughout the area. And also, across the street, there are at least two or more houses that have pavers in there. I don't know when they were put in, but it's exactly what we're using ourselves, and it's commensurate with what's in the neighborhood.
All right, public comments. The applicant's presentation is closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
Maybe to help your point, that brick, and as you held up that piece of the proposed paver, it actually is not a rectangle. It actually has an interlocking teeth on it. So to me, it doesn't look like brick.
Mimicking.
I'll just put it that way. Okay, and it's a good system.
We actually appreciate the proposal being pervious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the other fact of the matter is I can appreciate the amount of, I'm sure, attention and care you put into this, because your house is perceived over 100 feet of this stuff. You know, this is really like what people know of your house, first impression. So I think it's a good solution. And if you're looking for a way to figure out how it works in, I don't think it necessarily looks like brick. It might be brick colored, but I don't think it actually emulates brick.
I would agree with Bill on that. I mean, I certainly approve of the pervious concept, and there are, and my sort of only objection is that when that particular material is installed, it does not look like brick. You can do brick, not even old brick, but new reproduction brick, which looks like old brick, and get a pervious solution, very good pervious solution. And I agree with Bill that installed, that will not look like a brick driveway. And so, but there are other solutions that will look much more like a brick driveway and much more elegant and still be pervious.
I don't think I have much to add. It's not a bad material, but it's not, I don't know that it's an appropriate material. There are better ways to, like you guys have said, there are better ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish with the property. I did go out there, the driveway is horrendous condition. There's nothing salvageable about it.
And I agree with the applicant that it would be, it's a nice thought to salvage that brick and maybe get some infill and relay it in an appropriate pervious manner. But I think that brick is set in Portland. I don't think you'll ever get it.
There's no telling where that brick came from. I bet a lot of buildings went into that driveway.
It's an old brick. You're not gonna get that Portland style.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with the details. I mean, how are the edges of the driveway going to be edged? You know, there's some talk about maybe retaining walls. So, I don't feel like I've got enough information on the geometry. What the pattern's going to be.
Do you have those photos, Frankie? I believe there were some photos in the submittal of that particular.
Yeah.
Is it, are you talking about? These are just those are sample.
Yeah, and that's actually I believe.
Were you referring to some of our precedent images?
Well, can you hold up that paver again that you held up a minute ago? Yeah.
And this, of course, is allowed to fill, so the water can go.
Right, and it has gravel like in
It would
between
be
the
gravel, and
joints. Yeah.
depending on the color, it could look like grout, which is what we have currently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with the hard set, because we have two large trees, 81 inches around at the 4-foot level. So I can't touch those, and they have roots. Well, that's what's causing the problem, is the roots of the tree are this big right under the driveway. And of course it buckles. So we can't use the standard concrete slab with some brick outlining, because that's going to
hurt the trees.
Get pushed up. Give it a couple of years and it won't be there, won't be level. So we need something that's flexible. It moves with the tree, allows for water to run off. And this was one of the solutions. I'm sure there are others.
Right. I think it's less the concept than just maybe that particular paver.
Right, and I know there are other pavers like that actually have a more pronounced sort of blocking system.
Yeah, this one, what we'd ordered was tumble, which would be rougher edges, so it wouldn't be quite as straight and uniform. Because we wanted a older look.
Yeah, that looks very machined.
This is machined, yes. And what we wanted is something a little rougher.
Yeah, softer edges.
But we can't tear down the driveway and reuse it, because and standard brick doesn't hold up. You know, you put a 4,000 or 5,000 pound car on it all the time, and it's not going to work.
Those aren't behaving differently than any other part of paper.
No.
If you drive a car, they're going to drag on it. You can put to keep it pervious, you can obviously grade it down, put a grid down.
It's all about the
It's just
substrate.
all about the substrate. We don't have really information about that here. And then, you know, you can drive a fire truck on it if the subgrade is good enough.
Obviously.
And it's going to remain pervious. And like I said, I think that whole concept is great. I bought it. It's just that paver is not going to look the way I think anyone really wanted to look.
That's my issue right there. Is I think you could accomplish the same thing with a different product.
So the notion of doing a paved driveway that has, you know, the gravel and it's pervious and exactly as described, but it might just be the shape or the form of the paver itself.
Yeah, I've even seen other concrete pavers that are much more convincing than that, as far as having a softer feel.
Well, and then I guess to Frankie's point, do we want a brick?
Well, yeah, I mean.
That's,
That's
I can
the
see where the.
flip side of the coin.
May I add one comment?
Sure. Yes, please.
You asked what the pattern would be. It would be a double basket weave, which is the same as what we're using right now, complements that. And the edges would be straight linear going back and forth. So it would be bordered with straight tiles going back with the double basket weave is divided. And that would be regardless of what material.
I'll defer to you guys. Your comfort level. I'm mainly on the vertical stuff.
I would like to see a restudy of material. I think the concept of, I just don't think this is a very nice, I really don't think you're going to like this one. I honestly don't. It's going to look like a commercial driveway. So I would like a restudy of material. It doesn't have to be a brick. It doesn't have to be an actual brick.
Is it the material or is it the?
It's the machined look of this.
I mean, if they were able to find a paver set the same way, but it just had a different shape.
Different. More of a, like you had mentioned, more of a tumbled look, less. What this is, I guarantee you, when you look at it, it's going to look like a street and not a driveway. I mean, this is something that's often used in a commercial application, and not a residential application. You may see it like
it's pretty suburban.
Yeah, it's very suburban.
I can't remember the name of the paver. I was trying to Google something quick and see if I could get these given one.
And I'm happy to leave that with staff to help, let staff help them.
So deferral and final review by staff?
Yeah,
I'm fine.
yeah, definitely final review by staff.
So Bill Turner, did you just make a motion?
I did.
And I think what we're trying to say is your system, your idea works well, and that's good. I think that's what I'm interpreting. We're just getting down to maybe a different shape of paver.
Yeah.
I think that's.
And you can work with staff on that, the getting the
Something-
shape right. You won't have to come back before.
Something less commercial.
That'll be the effect of this motion.
So we can get samples of the actual paper that we would be looking at. That one's not an exact sample.
Yeah, and whatever, Frankie, you'll be working with Frankie and Linda.
Okay.
So they'll guide you on what they want to see. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for deferral with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Put the motion to a vote. Bill Huey?
Yeah,
Bill Turner?
Yeah.
Gilmore?
Yeah.
Chair votes for the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, agenda item 9 is 20 Atlantic Street. Frankie, could you give us an introduction overview, please?
Okay, 20 Atlantic Street is not surveyed in Charleston since 1910 in the Old Historic District, requesting preliminary approval for fenestration alterations. This is the property's location on Atlantic Street. Existing site photos. Context photos of Atlantic. Sanborn map from 1944. All right, we will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, my name is Evan Gonzalez with Bow Clowney Architects. We are presenting for final for Kirshner at 20 Atlantic. Got conceptual approval 2 months ago with minimal comments, and we actually incorporated, I think, all of the comments. So the first comment was the shutters should remain louvered. So in our proposed, we kept the louvered shutters. And then we also retained the original transoms on the French door on the second floor. And we moved the posts that we were adding that stability for the railing. We'll just internally support those. The only proposed change from our last submittal is the board had a problem with the double windows we were proposing on the second floor bedroom. So we would like to come back and consider adding a window that aligns with the new window on the first floor. It's sort of out of the view corridor. That's it.
Any questions for the applicant? No? Thank you. There was no written public comments submitted. Anyone speaking? Okay. Frankie, if you give us any staff comments and recommendations.
Previous staff and board comments have been addressed. We were recommending preliminary approval since it had only received conceptual approval prior, and because we have to review the permit drawings anyway. But we were recommending final review by staff with permit drawings.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Gonzalez, did you want to respond to anything in the staff comments? Okay. All right, we're in board discussion.
I think it all looks nice. I think the windows especially is a much more pleasing arrangement.
I agree. We had minimal comments and I think they were incorporated.
Go with it.
Who's that?
Go with it.
Oh, what about final versus preliminary?
I think procedurally, Frankie was saying, if it goes final review by staff, I would just go with what Frankie recommended. Okay, I'll just go with it. Preliminary approval and final review by staff and permit drawings.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval and final review by staff permit drawings. Do I have a second?
Second.
The motion to a vote. Fillmore.
In favor.
Bill Hewitt.
In favor.
Bill Turner.
In favor.
Chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 10-119 Cummings Street. Frank, if you give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
119 Cummings Street is a category 3 in Red Cliff Borough, circa 1850 in the Old Historic District, requesting conceptual approval for new accessory dwelling unit area. This is the location on Cummings Street. Existing site photos. A context of Cummings Street. And we had the previous thought. And the Sanborn map from 1888. I know we looked at these before, so I'm just going to skip on the applicant presentation.
Right here. My name is Batten with Power Architects. Last month, you previously saw this, as Frankie just mentioned. Skip this. Do a little redundant on this. So what I want to point out, and so we specifically, in our now new presentation, are addressing the items obviously that y'all mentioned. We actually find that y'all's items are much more improved. But I want to point out, this is the existing survey, and the existing survey, existing conditions has some existing paving and driveway, which was one of the issues that y'all had an issue with. But you can see how lush it is, and it's surprisingly different from if we see just, these are the winter photographs. The images on this
survey, or quite lush, taken a few weeks ago. You'll see that's important because we're trying to play off the existing as one of y'all's comments. Just to remind you, this is the Sanborn map. Our ADU is pretty much in the same location as what was there previous. It seems that throughout the years, this site has been whittled down in size a little bit. This site actually has existed in 1888, has three structures on it. And this is what we have previously submitted. Now, I'll remind you going forward that one of the issues you'll have was the height of this ADU, and we were really eking out every aspect of the 2.5 to 3 story zoning items. But part of what y'all mentioned was that the driveway was a little too aggressive. You didn't like the double-loaded driveway, and maybe just too much trying to fit all these pieces together and actually just putting a little too much paving on the ground. This is our solution, and what you'll find is, as again, we're just working with the existing landscaping. It has a few zones of a sitting area, a little fountain, you'll see that round structure in white. And the way we're addressing the ADU is we didn't really shift it that much. And it was pretty obvious that maybe we should have been doing this the whole time, is that when we reduce the ground floor, you're looking at what is the first floor now, you'll see that, I'll go back and forth, I'll just jump to the elevations real quick. This is what we had previously submitted, and there was some concern about the storage area underneath, and we were just trying to make it attractive. We weren't trying to suggest a garage, though some of the elements, the carriage doors, would suggest that. Our solution is just quite literally take it down to DFE. It turns out that it, just by coincidence, is level with the existing house. And just in its modesty, it's not all that dissimilar, but we're still trying to use all these, even though we've taken a floor out, we're still trying to use all items to continue to reduce the scale. This house, the eave is actually lower than the second porch beam. And our little form that pops out for the front facade here, we're just extending that roof to try to make that happen. So we're trying to use every little trick to whittle the scale down. You're just seeing the two facades folded. And part of this, in its modesty, we're just trying to focus on one single point. And hopefully, that again just brings the scale down. This is some other site photographs. These are from the street. Just a reminder just how lush this backyard is. It's really hard to see to the rear. Even on both sides, it's just that skewed. Before just seeing the height. And before, you can see this is what we submitted a month ago. We were just trying to play off that gable in the rear to try to set off it being subordinate. This is our solution just by taking out the story quite literally, what y'all suggested. This is the rear. There's a dashed line there showing the fence, but we're not showing the fence. One little item that Julie had mentioned, I'll mention it now, plan, is that we're considering just our strategy on how the form is. Since we lost all the storage behind, we're kind of extruding some of these forms and maybe just creating a background for maybe some concealed storage areas or just concealed items on the site, kind of a back of house situation, and we're just using the narrowness of the site to help us in doing that. I just got images of how narrow this site is. Or the view corridors. The site's actually a double lot, but the view corridors are pretty acute. I believe I mentioned it all in this question.
Any questions, Charlotte?
One, a couple of them. So you're just leaving the driveway parking situation as it is now? Not really any changes now.
That's correct.
Okay.
That was a major issue, and it turns out that it's gracious now, and you can still comment on that. But so far, the owners feel like maybe there's just no sense in working at that.
Well, what's up there?
Well, there was some consideration that once you start building things and construction traffic, and that you might have to tear up some stuff anyway. But based on y'all's comments, y'all steered them thinking that it was okay to begin with.
The second question was the changes that you made in the roof pitch and roof form, were those as a way to bring the scale of the building down, or
Well,
something else?
part of that's owner driven and just having a gable on both ends. However, I think that even if it was hipped, you could still try to work the roof down a little just to bring a little more reason for the dormer. And like I said, just to try to create a singular focal point and have everything else become modest.
I bring that up because I think your roof pitch, even the steeper roof pitch was better before, and I would hate that you had lost that just to bring the building down, because I think just taking that floor out would have.
Actually, we looked at that, and you're right. Once the steeper roof pitch does help us, and actually maybe just in this elevation alone, the gable does help us in that part.
I think the steeper roof pitch related to the main building better.
Sure.
And I just think it was more. I guess what I'm saying, I would hate that you flash the roof out just as a way to bring the building down. Yeah, because I think just taking the base down was.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, we had 3 public comments submitted. From Connie and Lowry Hughes at 119 Cummings Street. Thank you for attending the Radcliffe Road Neighborhood Association membership. Yes, that's.
There's 2 then, not 5.
They appreciated your willingness to share your plans with the attendees. Although we did not have the opportunity to take a formal vote, neighbors seem to be very supportive of your plans. Should you, your architect, or the city need a formal vote, please let me know. But in our board's mind, there's been no opposition from the neighbors. A note from Ronald Hornbeck at 116B Cummings Street. They have no objections and support the project. And the same note from Catherine Mallory at 115 Cumming. They have no objections and support the project. Is there anyone speaking?
Laura Thayer of the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC appreciates the reduction in height, which results in a significant improvement to this proposal. However, further study is needed to allow the main body of the building to reflect unified massing, as well as a simplified, rational fenestration pattern. Thank you.
All right. Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff had an observation, previous staff and board comments have been addressed. Staff conditions for approval to verify that shutters are sized to fit windows and have appropriate hardware. And that we suggest adding a bracket to the awnings over the French doors on south elevation, similar to the door at the elevator. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with final review by staff of permit drawings. I'm sure that was supposed to say this.
With staff comments.
With staff comments.
Ben, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments?
No, but heard the previous comment, but just addressing this administration and working out that we would we'd like to do that. And it sounds like with conditions, just continue to study that and get it more refined as we go forward.
All right, we are in board discussion.
I think, I appreciate Phil.
Yeah, it's a lot lower.
Well accomplished with the reduction of the base. I think that the original roof form was better. And I would be okay with a little increase in height from where it is now and a better looking roof form.
Back to the reform.
That was really my
That's my only,
Cool.
that's my only thought.
Do y'all want to make a motion with the board comment? Fillmore?
Where are we here? I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff conditions. I don't know, the bracket, you think? The bracket on that. I don't have a, okay. Conceptual approval with staff conditions and a board comment to consider restudying the roof form to be more in line with the previous submittal and final review by staff.
All right. We have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff conditions for approval and a board comment to consider restudying the roof form to be more in line with the previous submittal with final review by staff. Do I have a second to Fillmore's motion?
I'll say.
Thank you, Bill Turner. The motion to a vote, Bill Huey,
In favor.
Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Turner.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, agenda item 11 is 4 Trumbo Street. Frank, you can give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
Okay, for Trumbo Street, did we also have it incorrect on here?
It's incorrect on there.
Okay. Fort Drummer Street is category 4 in Charleston Village, circa 1870 in the Old and Historic District. Apparently, I copied and pasted the wrong description, so that has been amended.
For what they're seeking?
Yes, they have made alterations since then.
Oh, okay.
I copied the previous description instead of adjusting for the new alterations they made. So my apologies to the board. This is the property's location on Trumbo Street. Existing site photos. Context of Trumbo. Sandboard map showing the history of the structure. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
I'm Jeremy Prescott, presenting on behalf of Charleston Erica Thistle. This is the third time we're presenting this for conceptual approval. When we presented last month, there were a handful of comments, many macro, some more detail oriented. We've taken all the comments to heart. We've made a lot of significant revisions to the design in order to comply with what was being requested and what was being suggested. In doing so, some of the detailed comments have become moot, but I'll try to touch on everything that still applies. As mentioned previously, one of the main parts of the design is elevating the house. We're only elevating it 2 design flood elevations. So we brought it to the lowest limit, or the highest limit allowed by the VAR. In making revisions, one of the issues that had come up before was with regard to the fact that we were enlarging the enclosed space on the first floor and taking over some of the existing piazza space. We're no longer proposing to do that. So the first floor, the heated square footage of the first floor does not change. The piazza of the first floor no longer changes, with the exception of the fact that the stair to grade is still incorporated into that footprint as it's been all along. In doing so, one of the comments that was previously made was how there was not a lot of piazza left once you get to the top of the stairs. Now, at the top of the stairs, the existing piazza remains. So there's no real change to the first floor in terms of its layout or its impact, aside from the fact that it's now 6 feet higher than it currently is. And the existing entry door still remains at the street as it always had previously been proposed. On the second floor, we had previously proposed, here's the previous proposal, we had previously proposed to create a second floor piazza that would be stacked above the first floor. We have not been able to find any evidence that supports our hope, I suppose, that there was previously a piazza, so we have removed that from the proposal as well. So we're no longer proposing a second floor piazza, open piazza. What we're still maintaining in the proposal is to create an additional heated space above what's currently enclosed on the first floor. So it is only that existing footprint on the first floor that would be extended vertically, which is about 95 square feet. But no second floor piazza now. No change really to the way that the first floor piazza is treated. And looking at the exterior elevations, yeah, this is the previous scheme where we had a second floor piazza, we had a larger rear area that we were enclosing. Now the roof remains the same relationship to the first floor piazza, and it's just the second floor area above the existing first floor heated space that would be enclosed that. The roof has been simplified as well. There were issues about the roof, about drainage and cornices. Some of that, again, became moot as soon as we removed the roof that was coming over the second floor piazza. A lot of those conditions no longer exist, so don't need as much attention as they previously discussed. But there's a system for draining the roof now. There are downspouts that will come down across where the rear enclosed space is. There was a previous comment about the doors at ground level, which were previously shown as louvered. It was mentioned that they need more detail, so the doors at ground level have been modified to replicate the entry door at the street. There was a comment previously about the entry door at the street and how there was an issue with it looked funny once the first floor was raised. It seemed like the biggest part of that issue was with regard to the transom. There's a siding transom above the existing door, and so that's been removed. So the actual door assembly with the pediment is still there, but that extra element that it's basically trim that surrounds some horizontal siding has been removed. It doesn't really make sense anymore. It now makes more sense to look up to the outside. Bill, you had mentioned realigning the columns when studying this. I moved one of them. In moving one, it kind of made the pattern a little bit more regular and didn't require a full cell of reconsidering everything. It was one that was near the entry door and it kind of threw off the pattern. So one of them was moved. And then in doing so, there's also a comment about the foundation creating piers instead of just having a smooth wall. So there are no piers added to the foundation. Piers have been added to break up that wall at the front as well as on the sides of the building to create a little bit more of a bay approach, recesses and pilasters. We had previously submitted a brick finish on the foundation wall. visiting the site together and walking around the neighborhood, we have taken a step away from that and gone back to a stucco finish for a few reasons. One of which is that the existing walkway that runs through the courtyard next to the house is paved with brick. So there is a lot of brick already on the horizontal landscape. And it's a little tricky to see. If the picture on the lower left, you can see a little bit of it, but the entire space alongside of the existing piazza is paved with brick. And then again, just walking around the neighborhood, within one block of the house, we were able to identify 34 different houses that had stucco foundations. So it was certainly something that was common, and that included, my last slide, that included 4 houses that were on the same side of Trumbo, including one of the sister houses that's next door, as well as, which is 6 Trumbo, as well as 2 Trumbo, which is not one of the sister houses, but is adjacent on the other side. So in doing a stucco foundation wall, we would have consistency going down the line. I believe that is that basically explains it again. Most of the changes were significant, and we tried to heed the detailed comments as well, but a lot of the detailed comments that were previously mentioned no longer apply with the new design. And then Eric on this whole would like to say a few words as well.
Hi, my name is Erica Missel, and my husband Charleston and I are the lucky owners of 4 Trumbo Street. I want to first start by saying I'm a horrible public speaker and how lucky I am to be last on the agenda today. I don't you hear me. Please also be patient with me, as half the time I'm clueless about your profession, and I am constantly taking notes to follow along and ensure we are making the requested adjustments. As our architect mentioned in previous meetings, our home caught fire about a year ago, and we have been residing with my mother-in-law ever since. In our home, the washer and dryer was located directly across from the kitchen stove, and to be honest, I'm very guilty for piling clothes on the counter due to the limited space. Our puppy went counter surfing one afternoon while we were at work and nearly took out the entire block of surrounding homes. We are fortunate to live by great neighbors who braved the fire and saved our charming home and animals. We know how lucky we are to still have a home standing with all of its history. It is not our goal by any means to take away from our home's character, but to simply grow in this tiny home as we expand our family. This being said, yes, we understand the simple solution is adding on to the back of the home for the additional space needed. Unfortunately, that same puppy that caused this mess in the first place is now 80 pounds, and hence creating the issue of losing more of the existing small backyard. At this point, we have simplified to adjust our wants and needs to make this board happy. We have done everything you requested, such as only adding past the columns and on top of what has already been enclosed. This addition is necessary for us as we need to move the laundry room upstairs and out from the kitchen. That being said, we are at our breaking point. This is our 4th time in this room, and we have constantly left confused, taking steps backwards instead of forward. We are young professionals trying to make ends meet with restoring this home. Our home has suffered several floods entering inside its past, and our crawl space is always at extreme dampness, which causes concern. Although our most economical option is to keep our home at the level it is, it does not make sense for us to restore this home inside and risk a flood putting us back out. We have spent great deals of money attending these meetings and trying to put together the pieces of what you all envision for our home, and are hoping that this time we got it right. Please, my mother-in-law begs you, approve our submission so we may begin the next process and our plans to get back into our home. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay.
I'll go ahead and start. First of all,
Wait, we're not in board discussion yet,
Okay.
just questions.
Okay.
But you
Oh,
can
yeah,
go ahead and
question.
make your
Go ahead and say
comment.
this.
Yeah,
Yes,
go
you
ahead.
can.
I want to first of all say thank you. I mean, you guys you've given up a lot from what you originally wanted. And I know it's been difficult, but I do really think you'll end up with a much better product. I do want to thank you all.
Questions?
Just I guess a quick question. At the end of the piazza, those like blank walls now, have you considered fenestration on those blank walls? Because it looks like you have a big closet up there that probably could receive them, and maybe a little manipulation of bathroom and some stuff. You could get some downstairs. Is that?
Yeah, but so right now, it's non-historic fenestration, and it is basically like a fishbowl. There's full windows on the lower level, and there's really no privacy. The way the house is set up, one of the windows right from the powder room, here's there. So that is also the spot that's closest to the neighboring house. So the thing that gets lost in these perspectives, and I should add it for in the future, but you're not seeing relative to the side of the adjacent house, right? So you don't we're perceiving more of these views than you would when you're walking down the street. So it seemed like of anywhere to probably be okay with reducing the fenestration out of the spot. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
One other question. What's your roof pitch on the addition? I mean, it looks pretty flat.
So it's continuous with the existing. So there's an existing metal roof that's sealed.
It looks like a standing state where you're going to have the slope you need to use that.
That's the plan. It would be a continuation of the existing installation. I mean, there's certainly waterproof detail that's could be part of this. But
The existing roof is a turn.
yes, yeah.
Do you know? It's an actual turn.
No, it's an old, yeah.
Do you know how you're gonna, since they don't make turn anymore?
Hopefully that'll be part of the, after we have our roll call tonight.
The next.
Again, that certainly needs to be studied in terms of the integration of that. I mean, with regard to what you're gonna see from the street again, shouldn't really be visible. So obviously the combination of the historic material that will be available now to tie it in and make sure that that's watertight.
Anything else? We have no written public comments submitted. Do we have anyone speaking?
April May, start Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for changes at 4 Trumbo Street, and although we believe this application has improved significantly from the first application, and we really appreciate the efforts, we do continue to have concerns about the proposed work of the piazza. The proposed work on the first floor to eliminate the existing windows on the piazza in favor of solid walls detracts from the aesthetics of the house. Continuing the solid enclosure on the second floor further detracts from the house. My comment was going to be, we would suggest pursuing an addition on the rear rather than the piazza modifications. It's a tough situation to make this project work. It's a tough decision. So I'm going to move forward on this one, and it may be when it's elevated, the view lines will be a little bit different in terms of what you see on the back, but it is a feature.
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC is supportive of elevation as an approach to ensuring long-term resilience and preservation of historic buildings, and we think there's a path forward for this house. However, we still believe this submittal is not appropriate. We encourage the board to clearly define and uphold best preservation practice for this proposal based on the BAR's design guidelines for elevating historic buildings and the policy statement on piazza enclosures. First, character-defining elements need to be preserved through the elevation process. The one-story open piazza should be retained in its current form, and ideally what has already been infilled should be restored. A number of recent projects have used elevation as an opportunity to restore insensitive alterations that can serve as positive examples, such as 146 Trabb Street and 15 Savage Street. If additional square footage is desired, we encourage pursuing a sensitive addition at the rear. You know, that would take away from the yard. It is very typical for zoning relief to be given for this type of approach in keeping with Charleston's traditional development patterns.
All right, Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sorry, it's deciding to freeze on me on the last one. Sorry. I will have go ahead and read the comments I had on the piazza columns. I didn't have the note about Bill recommending that last time. So if that was a recommendation of Bill's, I will strike that comment. But piazza columns are being relocated with one being removed. The infill area on the west elevation is now devoid of windows or other detailing, and ground floor detailing on the east elevation and the proposed perspective views don't appear to match. That was just a drawing comment, so you can make sure they match. We're not asking something to be changed there. Staff conditions for approval. Bill Huey, was that a recommendation of yours too?
Sorry?
Was that a recommendation of yours to eliminate or move the columns and eliminate one of them?
I think it was this Bill's.
Oh, it was Bill Turner.
Oh, I apologize.
Too many bills. If that was a previous comment, I will strike my motion.
Too many votes.
So no one, okay.
So I'll strike comment one. Omit flood vents proposed for front of house. Additional. Additional area needs some type of detailing and should be differentiated from historic house. I believe she means the second floor
Addition area.
Fixed louver shutters on front elevation or awkward should be restudied. And addressing a previous board comment, piers have been added to the new base. However, the design for these is not complementary to the house or to Charleston. The proportion of the span between pilasters at the front is wide and the shutter additions appear as applique. Rework design of the base by studying ground floor treatment of Charleston buildings which use piers and pilasters but reflect more of a solid base with recesses that reflect what occurs above rather than a large recess more typical of a beach house. These are reduced versions. Staff recommendation deferral for general architecture direction with staff conditions.
Did y'all want to respond to or clarify anything in the staff comments or the public comment before moving to board discussion?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to circle back on was the conversation about the rear addition, or like that as a concept. When we first approached zoning at the very beginning of the project, it spoke to Penny, she kind of tried to steer us away from that, as it even seemed that the concept of if you all would approve within the footprint, that was something that the zoning board was much more in favor of. So they kind of pushed us away, even right out of the gate. Like aside from the personal reasons, they kind of encouraged us to not study going off the back of the house. So that's we've gone through the variance process, special exception process, to get to this point with the stair on the side of it, in that sense, eliminated. But so we, again, we've come to this point just based on those initial conversations as well. So, with regard to the pilasters, I'm certainly happy to study those further. I feel like that's something that can be done while progressing the design through the next stages of things. Otherwise, a comment about trying to maintain the character of the piazza when raising it. So the piazza itself is maintained, or maintaining it almost full as we raise it. But was your comment with regard to the rear area that was previously enclosed? Or that was, I'm sorry, I just didn't totally follow that. Because your comment about trying to maintain it, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take that entire first floor and basically just maintain it in its current state.
Yeah, I think our comment was more focused on the opportunity to undo enclosures. That's what we've always advocated for, so that's where we're coming from with that.
But I believe that's.
Thank you.
All right. Public comment to the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Concerning the base of the building, we talked about doing brick to kind of as a nod to what's there now, and also to give some texture. I prefer the brick, but if it goes to stucco, then I think some simple things like introducing some scoring and stucco would help. The house that was raised on Ashley Avenue across from Columbia Lane. I looked at that. If you look at that, they did a nice job. It's a stucco base, and just a simple thing of introducing scoring.
Sure,
it helps tremendously. I agree with eliminating the expressed piers on the front, because that's not a typical thing that you see on a single house. You see the express piers on the side underneath the columns. So I would eliminate those on the front. I think in my opinion, we're mostly down to a lot of details. The roof above the piazza, I would do one or two things. Right now you have just a gable coming out and kind of holds the triangle thing. I would either introduce a parapet wall, which is what you typically see around single houses. Just take a tour around, I can see thousands of them. Or maybe even tipping that is another thing. I think it just give a little bit more refinement and would be a little more historically appropriate. When you look at the corner of the piazza, there are a lot of elements coming through there that I think need to be figured out. It looks like in the drawings, the piazza screen wall is actually coming out further than the foundation below. So it's just studying how all those elements come together, the masonry foundation, the band board, piazza screen, just kind of, and you'll be working all that out in your details, really figuring out that details. And then I talked earlier about how are you going to transition from the old roof to the new roof, the addition, and you're not really going to be a piece in that. So another solution might be to just try to drop, since that's closet in there, drop that roof down just and tuck it underneath that cornice. There, you're dealing with a whole new roof that you've got a break there that you're not trying to tie into the roof. I think that would be a simple solution. I agree with staff on the ground level louvers on the front. I would treat those as punched openings and push those shutters into the punched opening instead of having them flush mounted. Like I said, I disagree with staff on the columns. columns. I think your change on the columns make a huge difference.
I struck that clock.
Okay.
So much.
Windows in the addition, they would be nice. If there's some way to fit a single window closet upstairs, make it single downstairs. But I understand that you've already been squeezed a lot of square footage. If the flood vents on the front of the house are not required by code, which I don't think would, built in, probably.
You've got a good number of them, I think it'll be okay.
The size too well.
Yeah, you use like smart fence, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get 200 square feet of area below the house per vent. So I'm thinking, I don't know how big it is under there.
That's all I've got. Like I said, it's kind of down to the whole lot of details.
I'm kind of with you, and I guess really just the two, well, maybe three things that I had really in maybe in addition or elaborating on what I interpreted one of staff's comments to me was that pilaster detailing, and that last comment 5 was thinking maybe perhaps I'm hearing that to maybe present instead of going up and engaging, the actual band of the piazza with the pilasters, that maybe you do have some sort of a header, below. That way it doesn't appear as stilty. That's what I'm interpreting as a
It
potential.
was a Tory comment, so that makes sense.
Maybe we're speaking the same language. I think I get the idea with those blank walls are on a pretty drastic oblique, but I do think maybe introduction of one window in the middle of those would kind of make more sense. And then I've been really wrestling with how you might have a solution for the piazza screen and entrance, because you're keeping it where it is and elevating a house around it. And I guess I'm wondering now if I don't know if it's too extreme. I guess this is a point maybe you guys could discuss with me, but I'm wondering to clean that up, if you raise the screen up and create a parapet at the end of that roof, just have it, raise it all the way up.
You mean
kind of like raise it up to here and end the roof that way. And you might put, I don't know what kind of opening you put in, shuttered opening.
I mean, I've seen precedents like that around that.
Yeah. That would clean up the end of the roof line.
It would.
Also bring this in plane, and then you probably would eliminate that last column because you'd be using that screen wall as the plane of support, right?
Yeah. And I've seen precedents like that.
There's precedents like that, yeah. That's what I was thinking. That might just clean up 1, 2, 3 issues right there. Those are really my big ones. And I agree with like the punched opening, the idea of pushing that back in there, giving depth to the foundation. And now I think that's all good. And that's really all I had. I appreciate the idea that this looks like and it is an enclosure that's existing, and then we're making it again upstairs, so it's really a double repeat of it. But I'm taking the idea that there's enough piazza that's there, and there's a lot more that hadn't been proposed before. So I'm taking consolation in that. So anyway, that's all I really have.
I don't think I have anything to add. I agree with you. I think if you pull that screen up, there is precedent of that generally on grander houses, and even an open window, a punched
like a
opening,
window or an opening, shuttered opening or something.
Shuttered, or I think that's a good solution. And the second floor addition of the existing first floor enclosure, I agree it's not ideal, but it's a small house. And it's comes a long way. It is substantially better than what we've seen before. But, I think putting a window up and down would be a big help, but I hear about dropping that so that there can be, if you can drop it below the cornice, that'll solve that problem. Tied into an alternate roof is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And that will solve that problem. So I'm okay with that.
I have nothing to add. I think this is a huge improvement. The applicant has clearly shown that, you know, you all are listening. So this is a conceptual approval. So in my opinion, for height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction, this is, I think, what we were looking for. And what I'm hearing from you all, and I'll defer to you all in details, but they're details
Yeah, just
for another round.
Just a refinement of a few issues is mainly it.
If you were to do a conceptual approval, would you want to see this again?
Yeah, one more time, and it's not to keep bringing you guys back, because usually in standard operating procedure, you have conceptual, preliminary, and final. You could, in theory, be here, 2 more times. But I think what we're trying to say encouragingly is, with taking care of some of these detail issues, hopefully one more time will be it. That's what we're saying.
So who's ready to make a motion?
So this would be conceptual. And now I've got to sort through this sea of comments.
Well, one of them's gone. Got rid of number 1.
Oh yeah, you got rid of number 1. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'll make a motion for conceptual approval, staff comments 2, 3, 4, and 5. A board comment to study raising the piazza screen wall up above the piazza roof line with a potential punched opening, be it that a louver, shutter, or window, and also introduction of, sorry, I'm trying
You're dictating a sea of comments.
Okay.
Also the introduction of a window or windows in the proposed addition, blank walls, and the introduction of a header at the pilasters that will alleviate or address staff's comment number 5, and provide depth of return at any other punched openings of the foundation. Depth of return, or want to see if the louvered elements are pushed back in, not applied, the impression of applied elements, depth of return at the foundation louvers.
You should also add the reconciliation of the roof of the new addition to the house.
Yeah, so it's simplifying the roof over the addition by lowering it below the cornice.
Next up.
I think that's it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments 2, 3, 4, and 5, and a few board comments. First, to study raising the piazza screen wall up above the piazza roof with potential punched openings. Second.
I'm sorry, I could elaborate on it, but that would be elimination of the forward street column, as the piazza would support the end of the show. The screen would support the end of the piazza. Sorry.
No.
But he understands that, you don't have to say it.
Well, that's what I figured, anything to clarify so that
He's got it.
when they fly through preliminary.
He's got it.
Okay, 2, introduction of a window or windows in the proposed addition, where the blank walls are. A third is introduction of a header at the pilasters to address staff comment number 5.
Foundation pilasters.
Foundation pilasters. Okay. 4, provide depth of return at the foundation and foundation louvers, excuse me.
Punched up beneath the louvers.
And then 5, reconciliation of the roof of the addition by lowering it below the cornice. Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion?
Second.
Thank you. The motion to a vote. Fillmore?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey?
Yeah.
Bill Turner?
In favor.
Chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. You're one step closer to getting out of your mother-in-law's house.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second to Bill Huey's motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. We are adjourned.
You understood about, the screen wall? Okay.
Sign.